Qur'an, Chapter 7, Surah Al-A'raf, by Sayyid Qutb. Translation by Muhammad Al-Amrani. In the name of God, the most compassionate, the most merciful. Alif Lam Mim Sad. A divine writ has been bestowed upon thee from on high. Let there be no distress in thy heart because of it, so that thou mayest warn thereby, and that it may serve as a reminder to the believers. Follow then that which has been sent down to you by your sustainer, and do not follow any masters other than him. How seldom do you keep this in mind? And how many a community have we destroyed, with our chastisement descending upon them by night or at midday as they were resting? And when our punishment befell them, their only cry was, "Verily, we were wrongdoers." And so most certainly we shall question those to whom our message was sent, and we shall question the messengers themselves. And then, with full knowledge, we shall recount to them their deeds. For never have we been absent. And on that day the weighing of deeds will be true. Those whose scales are heavy with good deeds, it is they who shall attain to a happy state. Whereas those whose scales are light, it is they who will have squandered their own selves by rejecting our messages. Qur'an 7, 1-9. Alif, Lam, Mim, Sad. This opening of disconnected letters has its parallels in other chapters of the Qur'an, such as the opening of Surah Al-Baqarah and Surah Al-Imran. In our understanding of these letters, we lean toward the interpretation that they are symbolic, pointing to the fact that this Qur'an is composed of the very same letters of the Arabic language that humans use. Yet despite this, they remain unable to produce anything like it. This in itself is evidence that this Qur'an is not the work of man. The letters and words from which it is formed were available to them, yet they could not weave from them a Qur'an of its magnificence. There is therefore a mystery beyond the letters and the words, a truth that transcends human comprehension. This is the interpretation we incline toward, though not with absolute certainty, for only God knows the true meaning of his book. With this understanding, it is plausible to say that the phrase Alif, Lam, Mim, Sad serves as the subject, while the predicate is the subsequent statement, "This is a book sent down to you." In other words, these letters and what has been composed from them constitute the book itself. Alternatively, it could also be said that Alif, Lam, Mim, Sad is merely an allusion, drawing attention to this very idea, and the word book serves as the predicate of an implied subject. This is a book, or it is a book. A book sent down to you, so let there be no distress in your heart concerning it, so that you may warn through it and serve as a reminder for the believers. This book has been sent down to you to serve as a warning and a reminder. It is a book meant to proclaim the truth boldly, to confront people with what they may dislike, to challenge their deeply held beliefs, traditions and attachments, and to oppose systems, structures and societies. The path of proclaiming this book is fraught with difficulty, and warning through it is a burdensome task. Only those who take up this book and stand in its defense, enduring the challenges it brings, can truly understand its weight. Only those who aim for the complete and radical transformation of human life, in its foundations and manifestations, in its roots and its branches, can comprehend the magnitude of the mission. This was the mission of the first bearer of this book, the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, as he confronted the dominant forces of Jahiliyyah in the Arabian Peninsula and across the world. And this mission is not confined to that time and place, nor to the Arabian Peninsula and its surroundings. Islam is not a historical event that occurred once and was left behind by the passage of time. Islam is an eternal confrontation with humanity lasting until the day of judgment. It faces humanity anew, each time they deviate and return to the conditions they were in during that first confrontation. Humanity falls back into Jahiliyyah time and again, regressing into a state of Jahiliyyah, a wretched, deplorable regression. And whenever this happens, Islam rises once more to rescue humanity from this regression, leading it once again toward genuine progress and civilization. The bearer of this message, the warner who conveys this book, finds himself facing the same difficulties as the first messenger. He confronts humanity with something radically different from the state of degradation they have grown accustomed to, their immersion in the mire of Jahiliyyah and their slumber in its overpowering darkness. It is the darkness of distorted beliefs, the darkness of unchecked desires, the darkness of tyranny and subjugation, and the darkness of servitude to one's own whims as well as to the whims of others. Whoever takes up this struggle to rescue humanity from the swamp of Jahiliyyah will taste the same difficulty and distress that the first messenger encountered. Such a person will deeply appreciate the divine directive addressed to the Prophet, peace be upon him. A book sent down to you, so let there be no distress in your heart concerning it, so that you may warn through it and serve as a reminder for the believers. And he will come to understand, through the reality of his experiences, who the believers are, for whom it serves as a reminder, and who those are for whom it is a warning. For such a person, this Quran becomes a living, dynamic book, descending anew in the present moment. Confronting the reality, he strives to change with a great and noble struggle. Today, humanity finds itself in a condition similar to that which prevailed when Muhammad, the messenger of God, peace be upon him, first brought this book. He was commanded by his sustainer to warn and remind, to hold no distress in his heart as he faced Jahiliyyah, and to aim at its complete deep-rooted transformation. Indeed, time has turned back to resemble the era in which this religion first appeared. Humanity has regressed into a state of complete and pervasive Jahiliyyah, encompassing its foundations and branches, its inner realities and outward manifestations, its surfaces and its depths. Humanity has fallen back into Jahiliyyah in its fundamental beliefs, even among those whose ancestors were believers in this religion, Muslims who submitted to God sincerely. The concept of faith itself has been distorted in the minds and hearts of many. This religion came to change the face of the world, to establish an entirely new order where God's sovereignty alone prevails and the sovereignty of false gods, tagut, is abolished. It came to create a world where God alone is worshipped, in the comprehensive sense of worship, and where no one among his creation is worshipped alongside him. This religion came to liberate those whom God wills from servitude to others and bring them into the servitude of God alone. It came to give birth to a human being who is free, noble and pure, free from the chains of his own desires and whims, and free from servitude to anyone other than God. This religion came to establish the principle of there is no deity but God. The principle that every prophet throughout human history was sent to proclaim, as this and other chapters of the Quran affirm. The meaning of there is no deity but God is none other than the acknowledgement that supreme authority belongs to God alone in human life, just as it belongs to him in the order of the universe. He alone controls the universe and all within it by his decree and his will, and he alone governs human life through his guidance and his law. Upon this foundation, a Muslim does not believe that anyone shares with God his control over the universe, nor does a Muslim offer acts of worship to anyone other than God. A Muslim does not accept any laws, values or beliefs except those that come from God, nor does he allow any tyrant among creation to claim the right to legislate alongside God. This is the foundation of this religion with regard to belief. And where does humanity stand in relation to it today? Humanity today is divided into factions, all of which are immersed in Jahiliyyah. There are atheistic factions who deny the very existence of God. These are the disbelievers, whose matter is so plain that it needs no elaboration or explanation. And there are idolatrous factions who acknowledge the existence of a God, yet they associate with him other deities and lords besides him, as is the case in India, in parts of Central Africa, and in scattered regions across the globe. And there are factions among the people of the book, the Jews and the Christians. These too fell into the sin of associating partners with God in ancient times, ascribing to him a son, and taking their rabbis and monks as lords beside God, for they accepted from them the claim to the right of sovereignty and followed their laws and ordinances. This was so even though they neither prayed to these rabbis and monks, nor bowed or prostrated themselves before them. And now, in our present age, they have altogether dismissed the sovereignty of God from their lives and have established for themselves systems which they call capitalism or socialism, and others besides these. They have devised modes of governance for themselves, naming them democracy or dictatorship, among other terms. In doing so, they have departed entirely from the religion of God and have reverted to the ways of the pre-Islamic jahiliyyah, as seen among the Greeks, Romans, and other ancient peoples who fabricated systems and ways of life by their own hands and intellects. And there are factions who call themselves Muslims, yet they follow the same paths as these people of the book, imitating them step by step as one sandal matches the other. They have abandoned the religion of God and have turned to the religion of men. For the religion of God is his path, his law, and his system, which he has ordained for life, whereas the religion of men is the path, the law, and the system that they themselves devise and impose upon life. Time has indeed turned full circle to the state it was in when this religion first came to humanity. Mankind, in its entirety, has relapsed into jahiliyyah, and all its factions have ceased to follow the religion of God in any meaningful sense. Once again, the Qur'an confronts humanity as it did in the beginning, aiming at the same objective, to bring mankind into the fold of Islam, starting with the foundation of faith and belief, and then leading them into the religion of God in its practical and societal dimensions. And once again, the bearer of this book faces the same trials as the messenger of God. Peace and blessings be upon him, faced when he confronted a humanity sunk in the mire of jahiliyyah, complacent in its stagnant swamp, lost in the wilderness of its delusions and submissive to the allure of Satan as they wandered astray. The aim, as it was then, is now to implant a belief and a way of thinking in the hearts and minds of people, grounded in the testimony that there is no God but God. And the aim is to establish a new reality on earth, where God alone is worshipped and none is worshipped alongside him. The ultimate goal is to bring forth a new birth for mankind, in which the human being is freed from the worship of other men and from the servitude to his own desires. Islam is not a mere historical event that occurred once and was then left behind by the onward march of time. It is today as much in demand as it was in the past, called upon to fulfill its mission in circumstances and situations amid systems and ideologies, beliefs and values, and traditions and customs that are strikingly similar to those it first confronted. Ignorance, jahiliyyah, is not a historical period confined to a specific era. It is a state and a condition. And today, jahiliyyah has spread its roots to every corner of the earth, encompassing all sects, ideologies, systems and ways of life. Its foundation lies in the principle of sovereignty of man over man and in the rejection of God's absolute sovereignty over his creation. It is based on the elevation of human whims, in whatever form they may appear, as the controlling deity, and on the rejection of God's revealed law as the supreme authority. Its manifestations, symbols, names and outward forms may vary, as do its sects and schools of thought, but they all return to this same fundamental characteristic which defines its true nature. By this fundamental criterion, it becomes apparent that the face of the earth today is engulfed by jahiliyyah, that the life of humanity is governed by jahiliyyah, and that Islam in its true essence has ceased to exist, even in the most basic sense of the word. Those who call to it today are striving for the very same goal that Muhammad, the messenger of God, peace and blessings be upon him, strove for. They face the same challenges that he faced, and they are called to emulate him in the spirit of God's words. A book has been sent down to you, let there be no distress in your heart because of it, so that you may warn thereby, and it may serve as a reminder for the believers. Qur'an 7:2. To affirm this truth and clarify it further, let us delve into some additional details. The societies of today, all of them without exception, are ignorant societies, and as such they are backward or regressive societies, in the sense that they have regressed into jahiliyyah after Islam had once lifted them out of it. Today, Islam is once again called upon to rescue them from this backwardness and regressive jahiliyyah, to guide them along the path of true progress and civilization. A civilization defined by its divine values and scales of judgment. When supreme sovereignty belongs to God alone in a society embodied in the authority of His revealed law, then this is the only form of true liberation for humanity, the only form of true freedom from the servitude to human whims and from the chains of subjugation to other men. This is the sole form of Islam, or of civilization in the sight of God, for the civilization that God wills for humanity rests upon a foundation of dignity and freedom for every individual. And there can be no dignity or freedom in a society where some are lords who legislate and exercise supreme authority, while others are subjugated as followers and subjects. Legislation is not confined to legal rulings alone. Values, criteria, morals and traditions all constitute legislation, exerting pressure on individuals, whether they are conscious of it or not. A society characterized by such attributes is nothing but a backward and regressive society, or, in Islamic terminology, a pagan polytheistic society. And when the bond of unity in a society is rooted in shared faith, vision and way of life, and all of this is derived from God, not from the whims of an individual or the will of another human being, then that society becomes a truly advanced and civilized one, or, as Islamic terminology defines it, a divine Muslim society. For such a unity reflects the loftiest attributes of the human being, attributes of spirit and intellect. But when the bond of unity rests on race, colour, nation or land or other such ties, then that society becomes a backward and regressive one, or, in Islamic terminology, a pagan polytheistic society. This is because race, colour, nation, land and similar ties do not represent the ultimate truth or the highest reality of the human being. Man remains human regardless of gender, race, ethnicity or homeland, but he ceases to be truly human when he is bereft of spirit and thought. Yet, through the exalted free will bestowed upon him by God, one of the greatest honours granted to him, man has the ability to change his creed, perception, thought and way of life, moving from error to guidance through awareness, understanding, conviction and purposeful direction. However, he does not possess the power to alter his gender, race or ethnicity. He cannot choose in advance the circumstances of his birth, whether it be his race, his colour or his nation. Thus, a society that brings people together based on matters tied to their free will is, without a doubt, more noble, ideal and upright than a society that unites individuals over factors beyond their control, factors over which they have no say. When the humanity of man becomes the supreme value in a society, and when human characteristics are honoured and nurtured, that society is indeed advanced and civilized, or, as Islam would term it, divinely guided and Muslim. Conversely, when materialism, in whatever form it takes, becomes the highest value, whether as a theoretical construct, as in Marxism, or as material production, as in America, Europe and other societies that regard material output as the ultimate value for which all other human qualities are sacrificed, including, foremost, moral values, such a society is regressive and backward. Or, to use Islamic terminology, it is a jahili, ignorant and polytheistic society. A God-centered Muslim society does not disdain material things, whether in the form of theory, recognizing that material substance constitutes the fabric of the universe we inhabit, or in the form of, quote, material production, and the enjoyment of its fruits. Material production is an essential component of humankind's stewardship on earth, entrusted to them by God under His covenant and command. The enjoyment of worldly blessings is permitted and even encouraged by Islam, as will become evident in the context of this surah. However, this society does not regard material things as the ultimate value for which the essential characteristics of man, his unique qualities, must be sacrificed. This is in stark contrast to Jahili societies, whether atheistic or polytheistic, that do precisely this. When human values and human morals, as defined in the divine balance of God, prevail in a society, that society is truly advanced and civilized, or in Islamic terms, divinely guided and Muslim. The human values and human morals in question are neither vague nor ambiguous, nor are they fluctuating or unstable, as some would claim in their attempts to spread confusion and chaos in moral standards, rendering them without any fixed point of reference for judgment or evaluation. Rather, these are the values and morals that nurture the human characteristics unique to man, distinguishing him from beasts and elevating his inherent nobility. They are not the values and morals that cultivate the animalistic qualities shared between man and beast. When the matter is framed in this way, a clear, decisive, and immutable line emerges, one that cannot be blurred by the constant attempts of evolutionists to dissolve it. At this point, there can no longer be such a thing as agricultural ethics versus industrial ethics, or capitalist morals versus socialist morals, or the morality of the poor versus that of the bourgeoisie. No longer can values and morals be seen as products of environment or living standards, arising independently as though these factors alone dictate and determine them. Instead, there are only human values and morals agreed upon by Muslims within a civilized society. Opposing this are animalistic values and morals, if such a term may be used, agreed upon by people in regressive societies. Or, using Islamic terminology, there are divinely guided Islamic values and morals, and there are regressive Jahili values and morals. Societies in which animalistic values, morals, and inclinations dominate cannot be considered civilized, no matter how advanced they may seem in industry, economics, or science. This criterion is unfailing in measuring the true advancement of man himself. In modern Jahili societies, the concept of morality has receded, abandoning everything that distinguishes man from beast. In such societies, neither illicit sexual relations nor even deviant sexual behaviors are considered moral vices. The moral standard has been reduced to matters of personal, economic, and political dealings, sometimes confined merely to the interests of the state. Writers, journalists, novelists, and all media and communication platforms in these Jahili societies openly declare to girls, wives, boys, and young men that free sexual relations are not moral vices. Such societies are regressive and uncivilized from the human perspective, according to the measure of mankind's progression. They are also un-Islamic because the way of Islam is the way of liberating man from his base desires, cultivating his uniquely human characteristics, and allowing them to prevail over his animalistic tendencies. We need not delve further into describing the present state of human societies and their immersion in Jahiliyyah, from creed to morality, from perception to lifestyle. The brief indications provided here are sufficient to outline the features of Jahiliyyah in today's societies and to clarify the true objective of the Islamic call in our time, as well as the mission of those who invite others to the faith of God. This is a call to humanity to return once again to Islam creed, morality, and way of life. It is the very same mission that the Messenger of God, peace and blessings be upon him, undertook. It begins at the same starting point from which he began his call. It is the same stance he took with this book that was revealed to him as his sustainer addressed him. This is a book which has been sent down to you. Let there be no discomfort in your heart concerning it, so that you may warn thereby, and as a reminder to the believers. At the same time that God glorified and exalted is he directed this command to his messenger, he also addressed his people, who were the first to receive this Qur'an, and to every people whom Islam encounters thereafter, to bring them out of Jahiliyyah. They were commanded to follow what was revealed in this book and forbidden to follow any protectors apart from God. For the essence of the matter lies in obedience. Whose command will people follow in their lives? Will they obey the command of God and thus be Muslims? Or will they obey the command of others and thus be polytheists? These are two distinct positions that can never be reconciled. Follow what has been sent down to you from your sustainer, and do not follow any protectors other than him. Scarcely do you take heed. This is the central issue of this religion. It is either adherence to what God has revealed, which is Islam, submission to God, acknowledgement of his lordship and the affirmation of his exclusive sovereignty, whereby his commands are obeyed and his prohibitions are followed, or it is adherence to protectors other than him, which is shirk. This is the rejection of the pure acknowledgement of God's lordship. For how can his lordship be pure if sovereignty is not exclusively his? In the address to the messenger, peace be upon him, the book was revealed to him personally, a book revealed to you. In the address to humanity, the book was likewise revealed to them from their sustainer. Follow what has been sent down to you from your sustainer. Thus, for the messenger, peace be upon him, the book was revealed to him so that he might believe in it, warn with it, and remind others through it. As for humankind, the book was revealed to them from their sustainer, so that they might believe in it and not follow the command of any besides him. In both cases, the wording conveys a sense of exclusivity, honour, and exhortation, stirring hearts and arousing a deep sense of responsibility. For the one to whom his sustainer has sent down a book, chosen him for this task, and favoured him with this immense blessing is indeed worthy of remembrance, gratitude, and a firm resolve to take the matter with strength and perseverance without weariness or hesitation. And because the task is monumental, entailing nothing less than a fundamental, comprehensive transformation of the very essence of Jahiliyyah, its conceptions and ideas, its values and morals, its customs and traditions, its systems and institutions, its view of life, relationships, and the universe. The narrative proceeds to shake the hearts violently, awaken the nerves intensely, and jolt the heedless natures immersed in their Jahiliyyah, driving them to awareness. This is achieved by presenting to them the fate of past nations who denied the truth, how they were destroyed in this world and their destinies in the hereafter as well. And how many a township have we destroyed? Our punishment came upon them by night or while they were resting at noonday. Their only cry when our punishment came upon them was, "Indeed, we were unjust." So we shall surely question those to whom the message was sent, and we shall surely question the messengers. Then we shall recount to them their deeds with knowledge, for we were never absent. And the weighing on that day will be true. Those whose scales are heavy, they are the successful. But those whose scales are light, they are the ones who have lost their own souls because they used to wrong our signs. The fate of past nations serves as the best reminder and the most effective warning. The Quran draws upon these realities, making them evocative and inspiring, striking the heedless hearts like awakening blows. How many were the towns that were destroyed for their denial? They were destroyed during moments of heedlessness, either at night or during the noonday rest, when people are most relaxed, unsuspecting, and secure. And how many a township have we destroyed? Our punishment came upon them by night or while they were resting at noonday. Both moments, by night and at noonday, are times of ease, relaxation, and unawareness. And destruction during such times is all the more terrifying and impactful. It provokes remembrance, caution, vigilance, and fear. And what was their response when the punishment came? They had no defense except to confess and acknowledge. Their only cry when our punishment came upon them was, "Indeed, we were unjust." Human beings claim many things, but to acknowledge and confess their guilt is rarely among them. Yet in this overwhelming situation, they had no claim to make except this one. Indeed, we were unjust. What a terrifying, awe-inspiring scene. To reach a point where the utmost effort is reduced to acknowledging one's guilt and confessing one's wrongdoing. The injustice they refer to here is shirk. This is the predominant meaning of the term in the Quranic context. Shirk is the greatest injustice, and no one is more unjust than one who associates partners with his Creator. While the scene is displayed in this world, showing how God's punishment overtakes the deniers, forcing them to confess their wrongdoing as they witness his might, the narrative suddenly shifts. Without pause or transition, it transports the listeners to the realm of the hereafter. The sequence of events is interconnected, merging the world with the hereafter, linking the punishment of this life with that of the next. In an instant, the perspective moves to the day of judgment. So, we shall surely question those to whom the message was sent, and we shall surely question the messengers. Then we shall recount to them their deeds with knowledge, for we were never absent. And the weighing on that day will be true. Those whose scales are heavy, they are the successful. But those whose scales are light, they are the ones who have lost their own souls because they used to wrong our signs. This vivid, evocative manner of expression is a unique feature of the Quran. It compresses the journey of the entire earth into a single moment, a single line in the book, merging the life of this world with the hereafter, connecting the beginning with the end. Thus, those who suffered God's punishment in this world now stand before him for questioning, accountability, and judgment. Their earlier acknowledgement, indeed we were unjust, is not sufficient. Now comes the ultimate questioning, the public exposure before the Grand Assembly on that fateful day. So we shall surely question those to whom the message was sent, and we shall surely question the messengers. Then we shall recount to them their deeds with knowledge, for we were never absent. This questioning is comprehensive and precise, involving both those to whom the messengers were sent and the messengers themselves. The entire story will be laid bare before the vast multitude, with every hidden detail and secret revealed. Those who received the message will confess, and the messengers will bear witness. Then the all-knowing, all-aware will recount everything God had preserved in his infinite knowledge, which they had forgotten. He will recount it to them with absolute knowledge, for he was present at every moment, never absent from anything. This is a deeply moving, awe-inspiring reminder and warning, and the weighing on that day will be true. Here, there's no room for deception in the scales, no distortion in judgment, and no arguments that could undermine the truth of the verdict. Those whose scales are heavy, they are the successful. Their scales are heavy in the sight of God, who weighs all things with absolute justice. Their reward, therefore, is success, and what success could be greater than deliverance from the fire and entry into paradise at the end of life's long journey? But those whose scales are light, they are the ones who have lost their own souls because they used to wrong our signs. Their scales are light in the sight of God, who neither wrongs nor errs. They have lost their own selves. What could they possibly gain thereafter? A person strives to secure benefit for himself, but if he loses his very self, what remains for him to gain? They lost their own selves through their denial of God's signs, because they used to wrong our signs. As we noted earlier, the term wrong in the Quranic usage often refers to shirk or disbelief. Indeed, shirk is a tremendous wrong. We do not delve here into the nature of the weighing or the reality of the scales, as some have done in the history of Islamic thought, with a mindset far removed from the Quranic spirit. The manner of God's actions is beyond analogy or comparison, for he glorified be, he is unlike anything in existence. It suffices us to affirm the truth intended by the narrative, that the reckoning on that day will be based on absolute justice, that no one will be wronged even to the weight of a speck, that no deed will be overlooked, and that no effort will be wasted. And we established you on the earth and provided you with means of livelihood thereon, but seldom are you grateful. 10. And indeed we created you, then shaped you, and then said to the angels, prostrate yourselves before Adam. So they all prostrated themselves, except for Iblis. He was not of those who prostrated. 11. God said, what has prevented you from prostrating yourself when I commanded you? He replied, I am better than he. You created me from fire, and you created him from clay. 12. God said, then descend from it, for it is not for you to be arrogant here. So leave, for you are among the debased. 13. He said, grant me respite until the day they are resurrected. 14. God said, indeed, you are among those given respite. 15. Iblis said, because you have led me astray, I will surely lie in ambush for them on your straight path. 16. Then I will approach them from before them and from behind them and from their right and from their left, and you will not find most of them grateful. 17. God said, get out of it, disgraced and expelled. Whoever among them follows you, I will surely fill hell with all of you together. 18. And we said, O Adam, dwell you and your wife in paradise, and eat freely from wherever you wish, but do not approach this tree, lest you become among the wrongdoers. 19. Then Satan whispered to them to reveal to them what was hidden of their nakedness. He said, your sustainer only forbade you this tree, lest you become angels or become among the immortal. 20. And he swore to them, indeed, I am to you both a sincere adviser. 21. So he led them by deception. And when they tasted of the tree, their nakedness became apparent to them, and they began to fasten together leaves of paradise over themselves. And their sustainer called to them, did I not forbid you from that tree and tell you that Satan is to you an open enemy? 22. They said, Our sustainer, we have wronged ourselves, and if you do not forgive us and have mercy upon us, we will surely be among the losers. 23. God said, descend from it as enemies to one another, and for you on the earth is a dwelling place and provision for a time. 24. He said, therein you shall live, and therein you shall die, and from it you shall be brought forth once more. 25. Thus begins the great journey of humanity, a journey introduced by the fact of God's endowment of humankind with dominion over the earth, a prelude to the detailed story of mankind. And we established you on the earth and provided you with means of livelihood, but seldom are you grateful. The creator of the earth and the creator of humankind is the one who endowed this human race with the ability to dwell upon the earth. He is the one who imbued the earth with attributes and countless correspondences that sustain life, nourish humankind, and provide for its needs. It is he who made the earth a suitable abode for human existence, with its atmosphere, its composition, its size, its distance from the sun and the moon, its orbit around the sun, its axial tilt, and the velocity of its rotation, all of these finely tuned factors that allow human life to thrive. It is he who placed within the earth sustenance and provisions, forces and energies enabling the emergence and growth of human life and its advancement. And he made humankind the master of the earth's creatures, capable of harnessing and employing them by virtue of the innate faculties and abilities he granted, faculties that allow the discovery of some of the laws of the universe and their utilization for human needs. Without God's enabling grace, neither this life nor its flourishing would have been possible. The weak creature that is the human being could never have conquered nature, as the adherents of ancient and modern Jahiliyyah claim, nor could it have stood against the overwhelming cosmic forces by its own power. The pagan concepts of Greco-Roman Jahiliyyah, which continue to influence modern Jahiliyyah, portray the cosmos as an adversary to humankind, the forces of the universe as opposed to human existence and movement. They envision humankind locked in a battle against these forces, armed only with its own might, and portray every new discovery of the laws of nature as a conquest of this adversarial cosmos. Such notions are not only absurd but also insidiously misleading. If the laws of the universe were truly hostile to humankind, if they were adversaries lying in wait to obstruct human endeavours, and if, as they claim, there were no governing will behind them, then how could humankind have come into existence at all? How could it have emerged in an unfriendly universe without a guiding will? And even if we assume its existence, how could it have survived, let alone thrived, in a cosmos whose forces directly oppose it? The Islamic worldview alone offers an integrated vision that harmonizes all these elements into a coherent, overarching reality. God is the creator of the universe and the creator of humankind. It is by his will and wisdom that the nature of the universe permits the emergence of human life. He endowed humankind with the faculties to discern the laws of the universe and utilize them for its benefit. This observed harmony is the mark of God's craftsmanship, of the one who has perfected all things in creation. His creations are not in conflict, nor are they at odds with one another. In light of this understanding, mankind lives not as a stranger in a hostile universe, but as an intimate inhabitant of a friendly, accommodating cosmos, under the care of a wise and benevolent creator. Humanity walks the earth with a tranquil heart, a serene soul and steady steps, fulfilling its role as God's vicegerent on earth, with the assurance of divine support. It engages with the universe in a spirit of friendship and gratitude, thanking God whenever a new secret of existence is unveiled or a new law is discovered that aids its mission, offering yet another avenue for growth, comfort, and joy. This worldview does not hinder human exploration of the universe's mysteries. On the contrary, it encourages exploration, filling the human heart with confidence and reassurance. Humanity moves forward in a universe that is a friend, not an adversary, a universe that reveals its secrets willingly, offers its assistance abundantly, and does not stand in opposition to human aspirations. The tragedy of existentialism lies in its bleak, malicious conception of reality, a view that imagines the cosmic existence and even the collective existence of humanity as inherently antagonistic to individual human existence. It envisions a crushing weight poised to annihilate human life and aspirations. Such a perspective is desolate and inevitably breeds alienation, withdrawal and nihilism, or alternatively rebellion, recklessness, and unbridled individualism. In either case, the result is tormenting anxiety, spiritual and intellectual misery, and a wandering in the wilderness of despair, whether the despair of rebellion or the despair of meaninglessness. Both are equally destructive. But this is not merely the tragedy of existentialism. It is the tragedy of all European thought, with all its ideologies and directions. Indeed, it is the tragedy of Jahiliyyah in every age and every place. This tragedy is what Islam eradicates with its comprehensive creed, one that instills in human consciousness a correct understanding of existence and the guiding force behind it. Humanity, as Islam sees it, is a child of this earth and this cosmos. God fashioned humankind from the earth, gave it dominion over it, and provided it with sustenance and means of living. He endowed humanity with the ability to uncover the earth's secrets and granted it laws that are harmonious with human existence, laws that assist and facilitate life when approached with wisdom and understanding. But people seldom show gratitude, for in their Jahiliyyah they do not know. And even those who do know cannot render to God's blessings their due thanks. How could they possibly? Were it not for God's acceptance of what they are able to offer, their efforts would fall short. And so, whether they are ignorant or aware, they all fall under the purview of God's words. Little do you give thanks. And then begins the story of humanity with its stirring events. It begins with the proclamation of man's creation in a majestic celebration, held in the celestial assembly of the most exalted realm. It is announced by the sovereign, almighty, glorious and magnificent, an announcement that exudes honor and reverence. The angels are gathered, and among them, though not one of them, is Iblis. The heavens and the earth and all that God has created bear witness to this moment. It is a momentous affair, an awe-inspiring event in the history of existence. Indeed, we created you and then gave you form, and then we said to the angels, prostrate yourselves before Adam. So they prostrated, except for Iblis. He was not of those who prostrated. God said, what prevented you from prostrating when I commanded you? Iblis said, I am better than him. You created me from fire and created him from clay. God said, descend from it, for it is not for you to act arrogantly therein. Leave, for you are of the humiliated ones. Iblis said, grant me respite until the day they are resurrected. God said, indeed, you are of those reprieved. Iblis said, because you have led me astray, I will surely sit in wait for them on your straight path. Then I will come at them from before them and from behind them and from their right and from their left, and you will not find most of them grateful. God said, leave it, disgraced and expelled. Whoever follows you among them, I will surely fill hell with all of you together. This is the first scene, a scene both stirring and grave. Let us begin by exploring the episodes of this story before reflecting upon them and drawing out their profound inspirations. Indeed, we created you and then gave you form, and then we said to the angels, prostrate yourselves before Adam. So they prostrated, except for Iblis. He was not of those who prostrated. The act of creation may signify bringing into existence, while shaping may signify the granting of form and attributes. These are two levels of the being, not merely two stages in time. For the word then, thumwa, here may not denote chronological sequence, but rather a progression in rank and significance. Shaping, as the bestowal of human form and distinct attributes, represents a higher degree of existence than mere material being. It is as though God is saying, we did not merely grant you existence, but we elevated it by endowing it with noble attributes. Thus, it is akin to his words, who gave everything its form and then guided it. Everything in creation has been given its distinct characteristics and functions, and it has been guided to fulfill them from the moment it was brought into existence. There is no interval between creation and the granting of attributes, functions, and guidance. The meaning does not change even if we interpret guidance as being guided toward its creator, for this guidance also accompanies creation. Likewise, Adam was shaped and endowed with human attributes at the moment of his creation. The word then, thamwa, therefore, indicates a progression in rank rather than a delay in time, as we prefer to interpret it here. In any case, the collective testimony of the Quranic verses regarding the creation of Adam and the emergence of humankind suggests that this being was endowed with human characteristics and independent functions simultaneously with his creation. The progression in human history was thus a progression in the emergence, growth and refinement of these attributes and the acquisition of higher expertise, not a progression in the existence of humanity, through a process of evolutionary transformation from lower species, as posited by Darwinism. The existence of successive forms of animals, arranged chronologically as inferred from fossils upon which the theory of evolution is based, is, at best, a probable theory, not a certain fact. Even the estimation of the ages of rock layers in the Earth, on which this theory depends, is itself based on conjecture, much like the estimation of the ages of stars from their radiance. Nothing prevents the emergence of alternative hypotheses that may modify or overturn these assumptions. Even if we assume the certainty of the ages of these rocks, there is nothing to preclude the existence of different species of animals in successive periods, some more advanced than others, due to the prevailing conditions on Earth at the time. These conditions may have allowed the emergence of certain species suited to their environment and the extinction of others when those conditions changed. However, this does not necessarily mean that one species evolved organically into another. Darwin's fossils, and those discovered afterward, cannot conclusively prove that one species developed organically from a preceding one, as inferred from the rock strata in which the fossils were found. They can only demonstrate that a more advanced species appeared after a more primitive one. This can be explained, as we suggested earlier, by changing environmental conditions that permitted the emergence of one species and the extinction of another. Thus, the emergence of humankind could have been an independent event, occurring at the precise moment when God knew that the conditions of the earth were suited to the growth, life, and advancement of this unique being. This interpretation aligns with the collective Quranic texts on the origin of humanity and the unique nature of the human being biologically, physiologically, intellectually, and spiritually. This uniqueness, even modern Darwinists, many of whom are atheists, have reluctantly acknowledged. It serves as compelling evidence of the distinctiveness of human creation and the lack of organic continuity with other species. In any case, God himself, in his infinite majesty, proclaimed the birth of this human being in a grand assembly of the most exalted realm. And we said to the angels, "Prostrate yourselves before Adam." So they prostrated, except for Iblis. He was not of those who prostrated. The angels are another of God's creations, endowed with their own attributes and functions. We know only what God has revealed to us about them, as we have summarized earlier in these reflections. Similarly, Iblis is a being distinct from the angels, as indicated in the verse. Except for Iblis. He was one of the jinn and deviated from the command of his sustainer. The jinn, too, are a creation distinct from the angels, and we know only what God has revealed to us about them. Later in this chapter, it is revealed that Iblis was created from fire, making him categorically different from the angels, though he was commanded to prostrate alongside them. In that magnificent assembly, where the sovereign sustainer proclaimed the birth of this unique being, the angels, those who do not disobey God in whatever he commands them and do as they are told, prostrated in obedience, without hesitation, arrogance, or even the thought of defiance. Such is their nature, their essence, and their function. In this, we see the honor God bestowed upon humanity and the absolute obedience of his angelic servants. As for Iblis, he refused to obey God's command and defied him. Soon we will learn what brewed in his heart and the thoughts that dominated his mind, preventing him from submitting to his sustainer despite knowing him as his creator, the master of his existence and the sovereign of all reality. Thus, in this scene, we are presented with three distinct examples of God's creation: the model of absolute obedience and profound surrender, the model of outright defiance and loathsome arrogance, and a third nature, that of humanity itself. In what follows, we shall come to know the unique qualities and dual nature of this human being. As for the first nature, it is purely devoted to God, and its role in this situation ends with its absolute submission. But as for the other two natures, we shall soon see how they unfold. God said, "What prevented you from prostrating when I commanded you?" Iblis said, "I am better than him. You created me from fire and created him from clay." Iblis dared to place his own reasoning above the divine command. He presumed for himself the right to judge according to his own interpretation of causes and reasons, despite the explicit command of God. Yet where there is a definitive command and a categorical decree, reasoning and conjecture must cease, obedience becomes obligatory, and execution is imperative. But Iblis, may God curse him, lacked neither the knowledge nor the awareness of God as the creator, sustainer, and ordainer, in whose hands rests all that exists. He knew that nothing occurs in this universe save by God's will and decree. Yet, despite all this, he defied the divine command and refused to act upon it, invoking a logic of his own. Iblis said, "I am better than him. You created me from fire and created him from clay." And so the immediate punishment befell him. God said, "Descend from it, for it is not for you to act arrogantly therein. Leave, for you are of the humiliated ones." Iblis's knowledge of God availed him nothing, nor did his belief in God's existence and attributes benefit him in any way. The same is true for anyone who receives a command from God yet presumes to evaluate it according to their own judgment, deciding whether to accept or reject it, or claims for themselves the authority to challenge God's ruling in a matter that he has already decreed. Such defiance constitutes disbelief, even in the presence of knowledge and belief, for Iblis was neither lacking in knowledge nor in belief. He was expelled from paradise, cast away from God's mercy, condemned to perpetual humiliation, and burdened with eternal disgrace. Yet the wicked and defiant one did not forget that Adam was the reason for his expulsion and God's wrath. He refused to resign himself to his wretched fate without seeking revenge. Moreover, he resolved to fulfill his role in accordance with the nature of evil that had now become his very essence. Iblis said, "Grant me respite until the day they are resurrected." God said, "Indeed, you are of those reprieved." Iblis said, "Because you have led me astray, I will surely sit in wait for them on your straight path. Then I will come at them from before them and from behind them, and from their right and from their left, and you will not find most of them grateful." This is absolute defiance in the service of evil and unrelenting commitment to misguidance. Thus, the true nature of Iblis is laid bare: deliberate, unyielding, and purposeful malevolence. His is not a transient or incidental evil, but rather an innate, intentional, and obstinate one. Here, too, we see a vivid, personified depiction of abstract concepts and inner psychological movements brought to life in a dynamic, living scene. Iblis petitioned his sustainer to grant him respite until the day of resurrection, knowing fully well that even this request could only be fulfilled by God's will and decree. God, in his infinite wisdom, granted him his wish for respite, but only until the appointed time, as mentioned in another surah. Tradition suggests that this appointed time is the moment of the first trumpet blast, when all that is in the heavens and the earth will be struck down, except for those whom God wills not, the day of resurrection itself. And now, emboldened by his long reprieve, Iblis brazenly declares his malicious intent. He will retaliate against what he perceives as God's decree of misguidance upon him by striving to lead astray the very creature God had honored, Adam, the one whose creation marked Iblis's downfall, curse, and expulsion. His plot is vividly articulated as recounted in the Qur'an. "I will surely sit in wait for them on your straight path. Then I will come at them from before them, and from behind them, and from their right, and from their left." Iblis pledges to lie in ambush for Adam and his progeny, on the path to God, the path of faith and obedience that leads to God's pleasure. He will obstruct all who attempt to traverse it. The path to God is not a physical one, for God is beyond spatial limitations. It is therefore the path of faith and righteous deeds leading to divine approval. Iblis vows to approach humanity from every direction, from before them, from behind them, from their right and from their left, seeking to block their way to faith and obedience. This is a vivid, living scene of Iblis encircling humanity, ceaselessly striving to mislead them, leaving most of them unaware of God and ungrateful to him, save for a few who manage to escape his grasp and respond to the call of truth. And you will not find most of them grateful. The mention of gratitude here aligns with the earlier part of the surah. Little do you give thanks, exposing the root cause of humanity's lack of gratitude and revealing the hidden force behind it. Iblis's relentless scheming, his ambush on the path to God, and his determination to divert them from faith and thanksgiving. Thus are humans alerted to the lurking enemy who seeks to drive them away from guidance, and they are called to vigilance once they recognize the source of this affliction that keeps most of them from being truly grateful. Iblis's request was granted because God's will had decreed that humanity would chart its course with the faculties God had instilled in their nature, the capacity for good and evil, the gift of reason, and the guidance provided by messengers and divine revelation. God's will also decreed that they would be subject to both guidance and misguidance, that the forces of good and evil would contend within them, and that they would ultimately arrive at one of two ends, fulfilling the divine law and God's will through this trial, whether they attain guidance or go astray. Thus, in accordance with God's eternal law and absolute will, both guidance and misguidance manifest in human lives. However, the narrative does not explicitly state God's permission for Iblis to carry out his threat, as it explicitly mentions God granting him respite. Instead, the text moves to declare Iblis's expulsion, definitive and irrevocable, condemning him as disgraced and accursed, and pronouncing the ultimate fate of him and those who follow him. God said, "Leave it, disgraced and expelled. Whoever follows you among them, I will surely fill hell with all of you together." Those who follow Iblis among humanity may do so by sharing his recognition of God and belief in his divinity, while rejecting God's sovereignty and judgment, arrogating to themselves the right to reassess God's commands and subject them to their own logic, deciding whether to obey or disobey. Alternatively, they may follow Iblis by being led away from recognizing God at all. In either case, whether by rebellion against God's judgment or by outright rejection of faith, they are considered followers of Satan, and their destiny is hell alongside him. God, in his wisdom, granted Iblis and his progeny the opportunity to mislead, just as he granted Adam and his descendants the freedom to choose, fulfilling the purpose of the trial that God's will had decreed for humanity. This trial distinguishes humanity with unique attributes, setting them apart from both angels and devils. For humanity has a distinct role in this universe, one that is neither that of the angels nor that of the devils. This scene concludes and another begins. After Iblis is cast out of paradise, God turns to Adam and his spouse. Here, for the first time, we learn that Adam has a spouse of his own kind. How she came to be is not detailed in these verses or similar passages in the Qur'an. All the accounts that suggest she was created from Adam's rib are tainted by Israelite traditions and cannot be relied upon. What we can assert with certainty is that God created for Adam a spouse of his own kind, and thus they became a pair. The law of creation that we observe in all of God's works is one of duality. And of everything we created pairs so that you may reflect. This universal law, this fundamental principle of all creation, suggests that the creation of Eve did not take long after the creation of Adam and was likely carried out in the same manner as Adam's own creation. In any case, the discourse turns to Adam and his spouse, as their sustainer entrusts them with his command, initiating their education and preparing them for their fundamental role, the purpose for which this unique being was created, the role of stewardship on earth, as explicitly stated in the verse from Al-Baqarah. And behold, your sustainer said to the angels, "Indeed, I will make upon the earth a vicegerent. O Adam, dwell you and your wife in the garden, and eat freely thereof as you please, but do not approach this tree, lest you become among those who do wrong." The Quran remains silent about the specific nature of this tree, for identifying its type does not add anything to the wisdom of its prohibition. This suggests that the very act of prohibition was the intended lesson. God had permitted them all the lawful pleasures, while commanding them to abstain from what was forbidden. There had to be a prohibition so that this species humanity might learn to recognize limits and train the innate will within them to control their desires and passions, to rise above these inclinations and rule over them rather than being ruled by them like animals. For this is the unique characteristic of man, the attribute that distinguishes him from animals and realizes the essence of his humanity. Now begins the role that Iblis had been destined to play. This unique being whom God had honored with such great dignity, whose creation was proclaimed to the heavenly hosts in that majestic assembly, before whom the angels were commanded to prostrate themselves, and because of whom Iblis was cast out of paradise and banished from the celestial realm, this being is dual in nature, capable of moving in either direction. He has specific vulnerabilities through which he can be led astray unless he adheres strictly to God's command. It is through these vulnerabilities that he can be struck, and it is here that the gates of temptation can be opened. Man has certain desires, and through these desires he can be led. Thus Iblis began to stir these desires, whispering to them both, but Satan whispered to them, so as to make apparent to them what was hidden of their nakedness. And he said, "Your sustainer has only forbidden you from this tree, lest you become angels or become among the immortal." And he swore to them, "Indeed, I am a sincere adviser to you." The nature of Satan's whispers remains beyond our comprehension, for we do not know the essence of Satan to understand the manner of his actions, nor do we comprehend the nature of his connection with man and his method of seduction. What we do know through the truthful revelation, which is our sole reliable source regarding such unseen matters, is that temptation toward evil occurs in various forms, and incitement to commit what is forbidden manifests in diverse ways. This temptation and incitement exploit the inherent weaknesses in human nature. However, such weaknesses can be guarded against through faith and remembrance of God, so that Satan is rendered powerless over the mindful believer, and his feeble schemes have no effect. Thus Satan whispered to them both to reveal to them what had been hidden of their nakedness. This was his goal. Indeed, they had nakedness, yet it had been veiled from their sight. As we will learn later in the narrative, this nakedness was physical and required material covering, as if it were their private parts. However, Satan did not reveal his true intention. Instead, he approached them through the deep desires of humanity. He said, "Your sustainer has only forbidden you from this tree, lest you become angels or become immortal." By this, he played upon the latent aspirations of man. For indeed, man yearns for immortality, to escape death or to prolong life as though it were eternal. And man desires a dominion not limited by the brevity of life. One reading of the text renders the word as malakain, angels, with a broken vowel on the L, implying that the temptation lay in becoming like the pure beings unbound by bodily constraints. Another reading renders it as mulkain, kings, with an open vowel on the L, suggesting the temptation of eternal dominion and everlasting sovereignty. The second reading is further supported by the verse in Surah Taha, "Shall I guide you to the tree of immortality and a kingdom that never decays?" According to this interpretation, the lure lay in the promise of eternal dominion and life, the two most powerful desires in human nature. Indeed, even sexual desire can be seen as a means to achieve immortality through the continuation of one's lineage, generation after generation. Knowing that God had explicitly forbidden them from this tree, and that this prohibition carried weight and authority in their hearts, Satan sought to undermine their resolve not only by appealing to their desires, but also by assuring them through an oath. He swore to them by God himself that he was their well-wisher and sincere counselor, and he swore to them, "Indeed, I am a sincere adviser to you." Under the influence of their driving desires and the deceptive reassurance of Satan's false oath, Adam and his wife forgot that he was their sworn enemy, who could never guide them to what was good. They forgot that God had commanded them with an obligation that they were bound to obey, whether or not they understood its reason. They forgot that nothing could come to pass except by the decree of God, and if God had not decreed immortality and eternal dominion for them, they would never attain it. All this they forgot, and they gave in to the temptation. So he led them through deception, and when they tasted of the tree, their nakedness became apparent to them, and they began to fasten together over themselves the leaves of the garden. And their sustainer called out to them, "Did I not forbid you from that tree and tell you that Satan is your manifest enemy?" The deception was complete, and its bitter fruit had been tasted. Through his cunning, Satan had brought them down from obedience to God into disobedience, lowering them to a degraded state. So he led them through deception. Then they became aware of their nakedness, which had now been exposed to them after having been concealed. They hastily began to gather leaves from the garden, fastening them together to cover themselves, implying that these were indeed their private parts, which human nature instinctively feels shame in exposing. Only through the corruption of this innate sense, brought about by Jahiliyyah and heedlessness, does man lose this natural modesty. And their sustainer called out to them, "Did I not forbid you from that tree and tell you that Satan is your manifest enemy?" They heard this divine reprimand, filled with reproach for their disobedience and disregard for the divine counsel. How this call was made and how they heard it remains part of the unseen, known only to God. What we do know is that it occurred, for God does as he wills. In the face of this divine address, another aspect of this unique being's nature now came to light. Man forgets and errs. He has weaknesses through which Satan can enter. He does not always adhere to the straight path, nor remain constant in righteousness. Yet man is also capable of recognizing his error, acknowledging his misstep, repenting, and seeking the aid and forgiveness of his sustainer. Unlike Satan, man does not persist in sin, nor does he seek divine support in continuing his wrongdoing. Instead, man turns to his Creator with humility. They said, "Our Sustainer, we have wronged ourselves, and if you do not forgive us and have mercy upon us, we will surely be among the losers." This is the unique characteristic of man, the quality that connects him to his Sustainer and opens the gates of mercy before him. Admission of guilt, repentance, seeking forgiveness, and acknowledging his weakness while relying upon God's aid and grace. He knows with certainty that he has no power or strength except through God's help and mercy. Without it, he would indeed be among the losers. Thus, the first trial was complete, unveiling the fundamental attributes of man. He became aware of his inner nature and experienced its reality. Through this awakening, he was prepared to fulfill his role as God's vicegerent on earth and to engage in the ceaseless struggle against his eternal foe. "Descend," he said, "as enemies to one another, and on earth you shall have your abode and sustenance for a while." And he said, "In it shall you live, and in it shall you die, and from it shall you be brought forth." Thus they all descended, all of them. They descended to this earth. But where were they before? Where is this paradise from which they were sent down? This belongs to the realm of the unseen, of which no knowledge has been given to us save what has been conveyed by him who alone holds the keys to the unseen. Any attempt to uncover this hidden realm after the cessation of revelation is bound to fail. Likewise, any denial of these truths based on the limited and conjectural knowledge of humankind is nothing but arrogance, for this so-called knowledge oversteps its bounds when it ventures into the unseen without possessing the necessary tools or means, and it is sheer arrogance when it denies the unseen altogether. While the unseen encompasses every aspect of existence, and the unknown in the material realm, its supposed field of expertise is far vaster than what is known. Thus, they all descended to earth, Adam and his spouse, as well as Iblis and his progeny. They descended so that enmity might arise between them, so that conflict might ensue between two natures and two dispositions, one wholly inclined toward evil and the other possessing a dual potential for both good and evil. It was decreed that this descent would serve as a trial, unfolding the divine will as he had ordained. It was written for Adam and his descendants to dwell upon this earth, to be empowered within it, and to enjoy its provisions for a time. It was decreed that they would live upon it, die upon it, and then be brought forth from it, resurrected to return to their sustainer, who would admit them to his paradise or cast them into his fire at the culmination of this great journey. Thus ended the first chapter of the human story, to be followed by chapter after chapter, in which man triumphs when he seeks refuge in his sustainer and falters when he aligns himself with his foe. And so, this is not merely a tale, it is a revelation of profound truths, a means of acquainting man with the reality of his nature and origin, the realms that surround him, the divine destiny that governs his life, the path approved by God, the trials he will encounter, and the ultimate fate that awaits him. All these truths come together to establish the pillars of the Islamic worldview. We shall endeavour to touch upon these truths insofar as the methodology of Fi Dilal al-Quran permits, leaving their detailed exposition to specialized discussions of the characteristics and foundations of the Islamic worldview. The first truth we derive from the story of mankind's origin is, as we have noted before, the harmony between the nature of the universe and the creation of the human being. The divine decree that encompasses both the universe and humanity ensures that human existence is not a random accident, but a deliberate and measured act of creation, and that the harmony between humanity and the universe is the fundamental principle. Those who do not know God, nor accord him his due, judge his decrees and actions by their limited human standards. When they look at mankind and see him as a mere creature of this earth that appears as nothing more than a tiny speck in the vastness of the cosmos, they declare it unreasonable to suppose that there could be any intentional design behind humanity's creation, or that humanity could hold any significance in the order of the universe. Some even claim that human existence is a mere accident, and that the universe around him is inherently hostile to his emergence and the emergence of life itself. Such claims are nothing but conjecture, born of the habit of projecting human limitations onto the actions and decrees of God. Indeed, if mankind possessed dominion over this immense cosmos, he would neither concern himself with this earth nor with any creature crawling upon it. For human attention cannot encompass the care and governance of everything within such an immense dominion, nor can it measure and coordinate all that exists within it. But God is God, exalted is He. He is the one to whom no particle in the heavens or the earth is hidden. He is the owner of this vast dominion, of which no part exists or endures except through His providence, just as no part came into existence except by His will. The tragedy of man, however, when he strays from God's guidance and follows his own whims, no matter if he labels them science, is that he forgets God. He imagines God according to his own desires, measuring God's decrees and actions by his own narrow standards. Then, in arrogance, he imposes these self-made delusions upon reality. Sir James Jeans offers an example of such misguided thought in his book, The Mysterious Universe. He writes, "As we stand on this, our tiny sandy speck of a planet, striving to uncover the nature of the universe that surrounds our earthly home in both space and time, we are first struck by a sense of dread and awe. How could the universe not be terrifying and overwhelming, with its dimensions so vast as to defy human comprehension? How could it not inspire fear, having endured epochs so long that the entire span of human history seems but a fleeting instant by comparison? The universe is frightening in its vastness and in the isolation it imposes upon us. Our home in the cosmos seems no more than 1/1,000,000th of a single grain of sand in the seas of the world. Most troubling of all, however, is the apparent indifference of the universe to life as we know it. Our emotions, aspirations, deeds, arts and religions all seem alien to its order and design. In fact, it might even be said that the universe exhibits a profound hostility to life. The vast majority of space is so cold that it freezes all forms of life, while much of the matter in the cosmos burns with a heat that makes life impossible. The universe is filled with various forms of radiation, much of which is destructive and deadly to life. This is the universe into which we have been thrown by circumstance. And if our emergence was not the result of some cosmic blunder, it is at least the product of what can only be described as pure chance. We have already explained that the assumption of a hostile universe, combined with the denial of any deliberate design or governing force, is an untenable proposition. For how could life emerge in a universe supposedly hostile to its existence, unless there were a supreme governing power that willed it into being? Did life itself possess such strength that it forced its way into existence despite the universe's opposition? Did this human being before he came into being possess greater power than the universe, enabling him to manifest himself against its will and nature? Such notions are absurd and unworthy of serious consideration. If only these scientists would limit themselves to describing the observable universe within the bounds of their tools and methods, without venturing into metaphysical speculation unsupported by evidence, they would fulfill their role, albeit imperfectly, of acquainting humanity with the cosmos around them. But they overstep their bounds, straying from the domain of secure knowledge into the wilderness of conjectures and illusions, driven by the small human ego. We, by the grace of God and His guidance, gaze upon this vast universe not with fear and dread, as Sir James Jeans describes, but with awe and reverence for the creator of this magnificent cosmos. We marvel at the majesty and beauty manifested in His creation. We find peace and solace in this friendly universe, fashioned by God and coordinated with our existence in perfect harmony. Its vastness amazes us, as does its precision, but it does not terrify us or make us despair. We do not feel lost or anticipate destruction, for our sustainer and the sustainer of this universe is one and the same, God the Almighty. And we deal with this earth with ease, affection, companionship, trust, and the expectation that we shall find within it our provisions, sustenance, and means of livelihood, as well as our joys and comforts. And we pray to be among the grateful. And indeed we established you upon the earth and created for you therein means of livelihood. Little is it that you give thanks. Qur'an 7:10. The second truth drawn from the story of mankind's origin is the dignity of this unique being among all living creatures, the enormity of the role entrusted to it, and the vastness of the horizons and realms in which it moves. It interacts with diverse worlds within the bounds of its servitude to God alone, in ways that utterly contradict the materialistic, reductionist ideologies which deny its intrinsic worth. Such ideologies reduce humanity to a mere cog in the machinery of the cosmos, assigning all significance to matter and its deterministic effects. They include the theory of evolution, which relegates man to the realm of animals, barely acknowledging his distinct human qualities, and Freudian psychoanalysis, which portrays him as mired in the swamp of base desires, incapable of transcending them except through the very mire itself. Yet this dignity, granted to this unique being, does not elevate him to the level of divinity, as certain Enlightenment philosophies suggest. Rather, it is the truth and balance inherent in the Islamic worldview. The birth of this singular creation, whose independent origin we surmise from the aggregate of Quranic texts, though we do not assert it categorically, was proclaimed in a cosmic celebration witnessed by the celestial assembly. This magnificent and noble birth was announced in the heavenly realm and throughout existence. In the verse from Surah Al-Baqarah, his appointment as vicegerent on earth was declared at his very creation, and his first trial in paradise served as preparation and training for this vicegerency. The Quranic verses, scattered across various surahs, declare that God made this universe, not the earth alone, a means to assist humankind in fulfilling this lofty role. He subjugated for him all that is in the heavens and the earth, granting him dominion over the entire creation. This underscores the enormity of the task assigned to him by his Creator. To cultivate and govern a planet, regardless of its size, is indeed a grand undertaking. What becomes evident from the story and the collective Quranic texts is that humankind is a creation unparalleled, not only on Earth but in the entire cosmos. The other realms of angels, jinn, and creations known only to God are endowed with distinct functions and are fashioned from natures suited to those functions. Humanity alone was given its unique attributes and responsibilities, This is evidenced in God's words. Indeed, we offered the trust to the heavens and the earth and the mountains, but they refused to bear it and were apprehensive of it. But man undertook to bear it. Indeed, he was unjust and ignorant. Qur'an 33:72. Thus, humankind is distinguished in the entire cosmos by its characteristics, among them injustice and jahiliyyah. Yet alongside these traits are the capacity for relative choice, the potential for ascending knowledge, self-will, and the ability to achieve justice and understanding, just as one can descend into injustice and jahiliyyah. This very duality is what sets man apart. All of this renders invalid the view of humankind based solely on the smallness of the planet it inhabits when measured against the vastness of the cosmos. Size, after all, is not everything. The human mind, capable of knowledge, and the human will, capable of independence within the bounds of servitude to God, elevate man far beyond the metrics by which Sir James Jeans and his like attempt to measure humanity's worth and role. This significance, conferred upon humanity by the story of its creation and the Quranic texts, is not limited to its role as vicegerent on earth with these unique attributes. Rather, its grandeur is enriched by contemplating the horizons and realms in which it moves and the worlds with which it interacts. Man interacts directly with his sublime sustainer, he who fashioned him with his own hands, proclaimed his creation in the celestial assembly and throughout existence, granted him paradise to partake of its fruits as he willed, save for the forbidden tree, and then entrusted him with the vicegerency of the earth. He taught him the foundation of knowledge, as stated in Surah Al-Baqarah, and he taught Adam the names, all of them, Qur'an 231. We surmise this refers to the ability to symbolize through words and names, which is the foundation for the exchange of knowledge and its dissemination among the entire human race, as we elaborated in our reflections on Surah Al-Baqarah. God entrusted him with divine counsel in paradise and thereafter. He endowed him with the unique faculties that distinguish his species. He sent messengers from among his own kind with divine guidance, and he decreed mercy upon himself, promising to forgive his errors and accept his repentance. This is but a glimpse of God's boundless blessings upon this unparalleled creation in the entire cosmos. Moreover, man interacts with the celestial assembly. God commanded the angels to bow before him, appointed some as guardians over him, and others as bearers of revelation to his messengers. The angels descend upon those who say, "Our sustainer is God," and remain steadfast, strengthening them and bearing glad tidings. They descend upon those who strive in the path of God, aiding them in battle and bringing them good news. They are also tasked with seizing the souls of disbelievers in rebuke and torment. Thus, the relationship between angels and humankind is profound, spanning this world and the hereafter. Man also interacts with the jinn, both the righteous among them and their devils. We have just witnessed the embodiment of the first battle between man and Satan, a battle that extends until the appointed time. The interaction with righteous jinn is also mentioned in Quranic texts, and their subjugation to man is affirmed, as in the story of Solomon, peace be upon him. Likewise, man interacts with the material universe, particularly the earth, planets and nearby stars. He is the vicegerent on this earth, which has been subjugated for him with its forces, energies, provisions and treasures. He possesses an innate capacity to unlock some of its secrets and discern some of its laws, enabling him to fulfill his monumental role. He also interacts with all living creatures within it. Finally, by virtue of his dual nature and capacities, man moves through vast realms within his very self. He ascends to the highest heavens, surpassing even the ranks of angels, when he dedicates his servitude to God and advances in it to its utmost degree. Conversely, he can descend below the level of beasts when he takes his desires as his God, abandons the qualities of humanity, and wallows in animalistic degradation. Between these extremes lie dimensions far vaster than those between the heavens and the earth, in the physical realm, dimensions that only man traverses, as inspired by this story and other Quranic texts. The third truth is that this being, despite all its uniqueness and distinction, is weak in certain aspects of its nature. This weakness renders it susceptible to being led astray, falling to the lowest depths from the reins of its own desires, chief among them the love of life and the love of power. These weaknesses are most pronounced when man turns away from God's guidance, succumbs to his own whims, or surrenders to his relentless foe, who has vowed to mislead him with tireless effort, sparing no means in his pursuit. Out of his mercy, God has not abandoned man to his nature or reason alone. He has sent messengers to warn and remind him, as will be further elaborated in subsequent verses of this story. This is the sure foothold of salvation for humanity, salvation from its desires through renouncing its whims and fleeing to God, salvation from its enemy who retreats and hides at the mention of its sustainer and at the remembrance of his mercy and wrath, his reward and punishment. And all these are fortifiers of his will, enabling him to rise above his weaknesses and desires. Indeed, the first training he received in paradise was the imposition of a prohibition upon him, meant to strengthen his will and manifest it in the face of temptation and frailty. And though he failed in that first trial, it became a reservoir of experience for all that was to follow. Out of God's mercy, too, is his keeping the door of repentance perpetually open to him. Whenever he forgets but then remembers, whenever he stumbles but then rises, whenever he strays but then repents, he finds the door open for him. God accepts his repentance and forgives his missteps. And when he remains steadfast thereafter, God replaces his misdeeds with good deeds and grants him manifold rewards as he wills. Moreover, God has not made his first sin a curse upon him or his progeny. There is no eternal sin. There is no inherited guilt. No soul shall bear the burden of another. Qur'an 6:164. This truth, as embodied in the Islamic worldview, liberates humanity from the myth of inherited sin, an idea which forms the foundation of ecclesiastical conceptions in Christianity, upon which rests a vast edifice of rituals and hierarchies, all entangled with myriad myths and superstitions. The sin of Adam, which in Christian thought clings to humanity as an unrelenting curse, necessitates the embodiment of God in the form of the Son of Man, Christ, who must then be crucified and endure suffering to atone for this inherited sin. Only through union with Christ, who, through his blood, expiates the sin of Adam passed down to all humanity, is forgiveness granted. But in the Islamic worldview, the matter is far simpler than this. Adam forgot and erred. He repented and sought forgiveness. God accepted his repentance and forgave him. Thus the matter of that first sin was resolved, leaving only the lesson of the experience to aid humankind in its long and arduous struggle. What simplicity, what clarity, what ease in this creed! The fourth truth is the seriousness, the fundamental nature and the unrelenting ferocity of the struggle against Satan. The story reveals the obstinate determination of this relentless adversary to pursue humankind in every situation, from every direction, at every moment. "Because you led me astray," he said, "I will surely lie in wait for them on your straight path. Then I will come at them from before them and from behind them, from their right and from their left, and you will find most of them ungrateful." Qur'an 7:16-17. This accursed being chose to engage in such scheming and to dedicate himself to it for the long term, choosing this path over lowering himself before God to seek forgiveness for his sin, despite having heard God's command directly and unmistakably. He declared that he would lie in ambush for humanity on God's straight path, obstructing them from traversing it. He vowed to come at them from every direction, diverting them away from God's guidance. He targets them particularly at their points of weakness, exploiting their desires and vulnerabilities. And they have no protection from him save through fortifying themselves with faith, remembrance of God, and resistance to his seductions and whispers, rising above their base desires and subjecting their inclinations to the guidance of God. The battle with Satan is the primary battle. It is the struggle against one's own desires through adherence to divine guidance. It is the struggle against base temptations through the triumph of willpower. It is the fight against evil and corruption on earth, which Satan leads his allies to perpetrate by adhering to God's law, a law that reforms and uplifts the earth. The battle within the soul and the battle in the external realm are deeply intertwined. They are not separate, for Satan lies behind them both. The earthly tyrants who arise to subjugate humanity to their authority, laws, values and standards, while rejecting the sovereignty of God, his law, and the values and standards derived from his religion are but devils among men, inspired and guided by devils among the jinn. The battle against them is the battle against Satan himself. It is not separate from it. Thus, the great, long and fierce struggle centres upon the battle against Satan himself and his allies. The Muslim, as he grapples with his own desires and temptations, as he contends with the allies of Satan among the tyrants on earth and their followers and sycophants, and as he confronts the evil, corruption and moral decay they spread across the land, feels, in all these struggles, that he is engaged in a single, unified, earnest and unrelenting battle. His adversary is determined and unwavering in his pursuit, and thus jihad in all its forms and manifestations must continue until the day of resurrection. Finally, the story, along with the reflections upon it, as will become clear, points to an innate element within human nature, the sense of shame at being exposed, at one's nakedness being uncovered. Then Satan whispered to them to expose to them what had been hidden from them of their nakedness. Qur'an 7:20. So he lured them with deception. Then, when they tasted of the tree, their nakedness became apparent to them, and they began to fasten together leaves from paradise to cover themselves. Qur'an 7:22. O children of Adam, we have bestowed upon you clothing to conceal your nakedness and as adornment, but the clothing of righteousness that is best, that is from the signs of God. Qur'an 7:26. O children of Adam, let not Satan tempt you as he removed your parents from paradise, stripping them of their clothing to expose their nakedness. Qur'an 7:27. All of this points to the profound significance of this matter and its deep roots in human nature. Clothing, which conceals physical nakedness, is both an adornment for humankind and a means of covering its bodily shortcomings. Similarly, righteousness is a garment that conceals the moral and spiritual imperfections of the soul. Sound human nature recoils from the exposure of its physical and moral nakedness, striving to conceal and cover it. Those who seek to strip the body of its clothing and the soul of its righteousness and sense of shame before God and humanity, those who use their tongues, pens and instruments of media and propaganda to normalize and institutionalize this effort in all its forms and insidious, devilish methods, are the very ones who aim to strip humanity of its innate qualities and the attributes that make it human. They seek to surrender humanity to its adversary Satan, who desires only to remove its garments and expose its nakedness. These individuals are the executors of the terrifying Zionist schemes to destroy humanity, spread moral decay and render it subservient to the kingdom of Zion without resistance, having lost all its human qualities. Nakedness is an animalistic instinct, and man does not incline toward it unless he regresses to a lower state beneath the level of human dignity. To see nakedness as beauty is undoubtedly a regression in human taste. The primitive tribes in the heart of Africa are naked, but when Islam enters these regions with its civilization, the first manifestation of that civilization is the clothing of the naked. As for the so-called progressive modern Jahiliyyah, it sinks back into the abyss from which Islam rescues the backward, elevating them to the level of true civilization, the Islamic concept of civilization, which seeks to restore and strengthen the attributes that make humanity human. The moral nakedness of the soul, its loss of shame and righteousness, is precisely what the voices and pens and all the instruments of media and propaganda are laboring to achieve. This is regression and a return to the age of Jahiliyyah. It is not progress or enlightenment, as these devilish, well-trained instruments would have us believe. The story of human origin in the Quran inspires these values and principles and clarifies them in the most eloquent and profound manner. All praise is due to God, who has guided us to this and saved us from the whispers of Satan and the mire of Jahiliyyah. O children of Adam, we have indeed sent down to you garments to cover your nakedness and as an adornment. But the garment of God consciousness is the best of all. This is one of God's signs, so that they may be reminded. 7:26. O children of Adam, let not Satan seduce you as he caused your forefathers to be expelled from the garden, stripping them of their garments to make them see their nakedness. Behold, He and his tribe see you from where you cannot see them. Verily, we have made the devils allies of those who do not believe. 7:27. And when they commit an indecent deed, they say, we found our forefathers doing it, and God has commanded us to do so. Say, indeed, God does not enjoin indecency. Do you attribute to God that of which you have no knowledge? 7:28. Say, my sustainer has enjoined justice, and that you should set your faces upright at every place of worship, and invoke him with sincerity in your faith. As he brought you into being, so shall you return. 7:29. A group he has guided, while another group deserved to go astray. Indeed, they took devils as allies instead of God, and yet they think they are rightly guided. 7:30. O children of Adam, take your adornments at every place of worship, and eat and drink, but do not waste, for indeed he does not love the wasteful. 7:31. Say, who has forbidden the adornment of God which he has brought forth for his servants, and the good things of sustenance? Say, they are for those who believe in this world and exclusively theirs on the day of resurrection. Thus do we explain the signs for a people who know. 7:32. Say, my sustainer has only prohibited indecent deeds, whether open or hidden, and sin and wrongful oppression, and that you associate with God that of which he has not sent down authority, and that you say about God what you do not know. 7:33. And for every community there's a term appointed, and when their term arrives, they cannot delay it by an hour, nor can they hasten it. 7:34. This is a moment of reflection within the broader context of the surah, a pause to contemplate after the opening scene of the grand human story. The surah includes similar pauses at every stage, as if to say, stop here and reflect on the lessons of this phase before continuing on the great journey. This particular pause confronts the unfolding battle between Satan and humanity, a moment of warning against Satan's methods and his subtle ways of deception, exposing his schemes both past and present, manifesting in various forms and guises. Yet the Quranic method never presents guidance in a vacuum or recounts stories merely for artistic pleasure. It neither states truths for theoretical display nor narrates tales simply for their aesthetic value. Rather, the profound realism and seriousness of Islam make its teachings and affirmations directly relevant to actual conditions faced by the Islamic movement. Here, the reflection addresses the specific reality of pre-Islamic Arab Jahiliyyah. Following the first phase of humanity's story, the context now shifts to the practices of Quraysh, who had created for themselves privileges over the other Arab idolaters, who came to visit the sacred house now turned into a temple for idols and their guardians. Quraysh had devised these privileges under the pretext of religious beliefs, falsely claiming they were part of God's law. They crafted rituals and rules to subjugate the rest of the idolaters, just as priests and leaders do in every age of Jahiliyyah. Quraysh called themselves by a special title, Al-Hams, and claimed rights that others did not have. Among these rights, particularly concerning the circumambulation of the Kaaba, was the exclusive privilege of performing the ritual in their own garments. As for the rest of the Arabs, they were forbidden to circumambulate in clothes they had previously worn. Thus they were compelled to borrow clothes from the Hums or acquire new garments for the ritual. If they could not obtain new clothes or borrow from the Hums, they would circumambulate naked, even the women. Ibn Kathir mentions in his Tafsir, the Arabs, except for Quraysh, did not circumambulate the house in the garments they had worn, interpreting this as a means of avoiding sin in attire they had previously used. Quraysh, being the Hums, would circumambulate in their clothing. If a person borrowed a garment from a Humsi, they would use it for the ritual. If they owned a new garment, they would circumambulate in it and then discard it, leaving it for no one to claim. Those who could not obtain a new garment or borrow from a Humsi would circumambulate naked. Sometimes women would do so, placing something over their private parts to cover them partially. Most often women would circumambulate naked at night. This innovation was entirely self-made, something they followed blindly from their ancestors, believing falsely that their forefathers' actions were divinely sanctioned. To this God responds, and when they commit an indecent deed, they say, we found our forefathers doing it, and God has commanded us to do so. Say, Indeed, God does not enjoin indecency. Do you attribute to God that of which you have no knowledge? 7:28. The verse continues, Say, my sustainer has enjoined justice, and that you should set your faces upright at every place of worship, and invoke him with sincerity in your faith. Here, God commands justice and uprightness in worship, following the guidance of the messengers who were supported by clear signs and practicing sincerity in devotion to him. God accepts no deeds unless they combine two essential qualities, that they be correct and in accordance with the revealed law, and that they be performed with purity of intent, free from any association of others with him. Thus, in addressing this reality of Jahiliyyah in matters of worship, circumambulation and attire, alongside similar traditions related to food, which they claimed to be divinely sanctioned, but were not, these reflections tie back to the first chapter of humanity's story. There is mention of eating from the fruits of paradise, except for what God forbade, a reminder of clothing and how Satan stripped Adam and his wife of their garments by tempting them into disobedience, and a reference to their instinctive shame at their nakedness, which they sought to cover with the leaves of paradise. These details from the story of humanity's origins and the reflections that follow address the tangible realities of that age of Jahiliyyah. Elsewhere in the Qur'an, the story of Adam is retold with different details to confront other contexts and situations, addressing their own specific realities. Every account is true, yet the Quranic precision in addressing human conditions necessitates the selection and coordination of details to suit the atmosphere and subject of each passage. O children of Adam, we have indeed sent down to you garments to cover your nakedness, and as an adornment. But the garment of God consciousness is the best of all. This is one of God's signs, so that they may be reminded. This call comes in the shadow of the scene previously presented in the story, the scene of nakedness, the exposure of shame, and the desperate attempt to cover it with the leaves of paradise. That was the bitter fruit of sin, a sin born of disobeying God's command and consuming that which he had forbidden. Yet it was not the sin spoken of in the myths of the sacred scripture, nor the fabrications that fill the artistic imagination of the West, derived from those myths and from the poisonous insinuations of Freud. It was not, as the myths of the Old Testament claim, the eating from the tree of knowledge, nor was it, as they falsely allege, a reflection of God's jealousy exalted. Is he far above what they ascribe to him, fearing that man might also eat from the tree of life and become like the gods? Such claims are but the inventions of those myths, nor was it the physical union between man and woman, as the fantasies of European art often revolve around the mire of sexual imagery, interpreting all aspects of existence through the lens of base desire, as taught by Freud the Jew. In confronting the scene of nakedness, which followed the sin, and in addressing the nakedness practiced by the polytheists of the age of ignorance, the Quranic discourse reminds humanity of God's blessing upon them. He taught them, made their affairs easy for them, and ordained for them the institution of clothing to cover their exposed bodies. This clothing not only conceals but also adorns, transforming the ugliness of nakedness into beauty and dignity. Hence it is said, "We have sent down to you garments to cover your nakedness and as an adornment." The phrase, "we have sent down," indicates that this provision is part of divine revelation. Clothing may refer to the inner garments that conceal one's private parts, while adornment may refer to outer garments that cover the entire body and beautify it. The term adornment may also extend to signify the comforts of life, wealth, and prosperity, all interconnected and interdependent meanings. O children of Adam, we have indeed sent down to you garments to cover your nakedness and as an adornment. Here too the garment of God consciousness is mentioned as being the best. But the garment of God consciousness is the best. This is one of God's signs, so that they may be reminded. Abdul-Rahman ibn Islam said, "He who fears God covers his nakedness, and that is the garment of God consciousness." Thus there is an inherent connection between God's ordaining of clothing for the covering of the body and the cultivation of piety. Both are garments, one veiling the physical nakedness and beautifying the body, the other veiling the spiritual nakedness and adorning the heart. They are intrinsically linked, for it is from the sense of God consciousness and modesty before him that the abhorrence of bodily nakedness and the natural inclination towards covering oneself arises. Those who lack shame before God and fail to cultivate piety are indifferent to physical nakedness and may even advocate for it nakedness of the body, of modesty, and of God consciousness alike. The covering of the body out of a sense of modesty is not merely a social convention or an environmental norm, as the voices that seek to erode the moral fabric of humanity would have people believe. These voices, driven by the malicious designs of the Jews as outlined in the protocols of the so-called Elders of Zion, aim to destroy human dignity and reduce humanity to the level of beasts. In truth, modesty is a natural disposition instilled by God in human beings, and it is a divine ordinance revealed to safeguard humanity's dignity. God enabled humankind to fulfill this directive by making the resources of the earth accessible to them. Here God reminds the children of Adam of his blessing upon them in ordaining clothing and concealing nakedness, thereby preserving their humanity from degenerating to the level of animals. He also reminds them of his enabling them to access the means and provisions necessary for clothing so that they might reflect and remember. Thus, a Muslim today can clearly discern the connection between the massive campaign targeting human modesty and morality, the shameless invitation to bodily nakedness under the guise of fashion, civilization, and elegance, and the Zionist plan to destroy humanity's dignity and hasten its moral decay in order to enslave it to the dominion of Zion. This campaign is also linked to the broader agenda aimed at eradicating the remaining roots of this religion by targeting even the faintest traces of faith buried deep within human hearts. These traces are being attacked with ruthless tools as part of a shameless and depraved campaign to promote both physical and spiritual nakedness, an agenda executed by pens and media outlets that serve the devils of the Jews across the globe. True human adornment lies in modesty and dignity, while animalistic adornment lies in nakedness. Yet in this age, many descendants of Adam have regressed to the Jahiliyyah of pre-Islamic times, reverting to the ways of beasts. They fail to remember God's blessing in preserving their humanity and dignity. O children of Adam, let not Satan seduce you as he caused your forefathers to be expelled from the garden, stripping them of their garments to make them see their nakedness. Behold, he and his tribe see you from where you cannot see them. Verily, we have made the devils allies of those who do not believe. This is the second call to the children of Adam, delivered as part of the reflection on the story of their foreparents and their encounter with Satan. It recalls the scene of nakedness to which their enemy subjected them after they forgot their sustainer's command and succumbed to his whisperings. This call becomes clear when understood in the context of the traditions of pre-Islamic Arab Jahiliyyah, specifically their practice of nakedness during the circumambulation of the Kaaba. They claimed that their ancestors' practices were divinely ordained, an assertion that Islam came to refute. The first call reminded the children of Adam of the scene their foreparents experienced and of God's blessing in ordaining garments to cover nakedness and adorn the body. This second call warns the children of Adam polytheists in particular not to succumb to Satan, who lures them into adopting customs, laws, and traditions that lead them astray, just as he caused their foreparents to be expelled from paradise, stripped of their garments, and exposed in their nakedness. The practice of nakedness, then, whether in the age of ignorance or in any era of Jahiliyyah, ancient or modern, is a manifestation of Satan's seduction and a continuation of his plan to mislead humanity. It is but one thread in the unceasing battle between humanity and its eternal enemy. The children of Adam must not allow Satan to tempt them to triumph in this battle or to fill hell with their ranks. O children of Adam, let not Satan seduce you as he caused your forefathers to be expelled from the garden, stripping them of their garments to make them see their nakedness. To heighten the sense of caution and vigilance, God informs them that Satan and his tribe see them from where they cannot see him. Behold, he and his tribe see you from where you cannot see them. This knowledge intensifies the need for vigilance and constant awareness. Satan employs hidden means to mislead humanity, requiring them to be ever watchful, ever cautious, and ever alert, lest he take them unaware. We have made the devil's allies of those who do not believe. Indeed, it is a truth, an awe-inspiring and terrifying truth, that Satan is the ally of those who do not believe, just as God is the ally of the believers. This truth carries with it grave consequences, and its implications are profound. The Qur'an declares it as a universal reality and confronts the idolaters with it as a living fact. It then reveals to us how the alliance with Satan manifests in the perceptions and lives of people. Here is one such example. And when they commit an indecent act, they say, "We found our forefathers practicing it, and God commanded us to do so." This was the claim of the polytheists of Arabia who committed the indecency of performing tawaf, circumambulation of the Kaaba, in a state of nakedness even among their women, and then justified it by asserting that God had commanded them to do so. They followed what their forefathers had practiced and claimed divine sanction for it. Yet despite their idolatry, these polytheists were not as brazen as the modern forms of jahiliyyah, that openly declare, "What does religion have to do with life?" and arrogantly assert their right to establish laws, values, and traditions independent of God. The polytheists of old fabricated lies and legislated falsehood, but they at least cloaked their actions with the claim, "God commanded us to do so." This cunning approach was even more insidious, for it deceived those whose hearts still retained a trace of religious sentiment, leading them to believe that their fabricated laws were divinely ordained. Nevertheless, this approach was less brazen than the modern arrogance that claims the right to legislate for humanity based solely on perceived expediency apart from God's authority. In response to this falsehood, God commands his prophet peace and blessings be upon him to confront them, rejecting their lies and clarifying the nature of God's commands, which are utterly opposed to indecency. God does not command indecency, and it is not his way to enjoin such acts. Say, indeed, God does not command indecency. Do you say about God that which you do not know? God does not command indecency in any form, indecency being anything that exceeds the bounds of propriety or decency. Nakedness, as practiced in their tawaf, is one such form of indecency. How could God command the violation of his own limits, the transgression of his injunctions for modesty, piety, and restraint? Who informed them of such a divine command? God's commands and laws are not matters of conjecture or personal desire. They are conveyed through his revealed books and communicated by his messengers. No one has the right to claim that something is part of God's law unless it is firmly rooted in the Book of God or the teachings of his messenger. True knowledge of God's commandments is grounded in certainty, and only those who possess this certainty can speak about the divine law. Otherwise, chaos would ensue, with every individual following their whims and claiming their actions to be part of God's religion. Such confusion is a hallmark of jahiliyyah, which always retains its essential traits. In every era when humanity reverts to jahiliyyah, similar words are uttered and similar perceptions prevail, regardless of the differences in time and place. In this age of modern jahiliyyah, we repeatedly encounter liars and fabricators who declare their whims and desires to be the law of God. Likewise, we face brazen and audacious individuals who reject the explicit commands and prohibitions of religion, arrogantly asserting, "Religion cannot possibly mandate this," or "Religion cannot possibly forbid that." Their only justification is their own desire. Do you say about God that which you do not know? After refuting their claims that God commanded such indecency, the Qur'an outlines the true nature of God's commands, which are diametrically opposed to their falsehood. God commands justice and balance in all matters, not indecency and excess. He enjoins uprightness upon his path in worship and rituals, drawing guidance from his revealed book and his messenger's teachings. He has not left the matter to chaos, where every individual follows their whims and attributes their actions to God. God commands that devotion be rendered to him alone and that submission and servitude be directed entirely to him, so that no one submits to another being's authority or bows to the orders of another for their own sake. Say, my sustainer commands justice. Set your faces upright at every place of worship and call upon him, devoting your religion sincerely to him. This is what God commands, and it stands in direct opposition to their practices. It opposes their blind adherence to their forefathers and their submission to human-made laws and traditions, which they falsely attribute to God. It opposes their indecency and nakedness, despite God's favour upon the children of Adam in granting them garments to cover their nakedness and adorn themselves. And it opposes their idolatry, which they practice by allowing multiple sources of legislation to govern their lives and acts of worship. At this point in the discourse, the Qur'an reminds and warns them, pointing to their eventual return to God after their allotted time of trial in this world. It paints a vivid picture of their return, divided into two groups, those who followed God's commands and those who followed Satan's path. As he brought you into being, so shall you return, some as a group guided and others destined for misguidance. Indeed, they took devils as their allies instead of God, thinking they were rightly guided. What a profound image, one that connects the beginning of the great journey with its end. The starting point of creation is tied to the final return. As he brought you into being, so shall you return. They began their journey as two groups, Adam and his wife on one side, and Satan and his followers on the other. And so shall they return. The obedient will return as a group with their father Adam and their mother Eve, believers in God and followers of his command. The disobedient will return with Iblis and his followers to fill hell as a result of their allegiance to Satan and their submission to his authority, all the while thinking they were on the path of guidance. Indeed, God guides those who take him as their ally, and he leads astray those who ally themselves with Satan. Now, they are returning as two groups. Some as a group guided and others destined for misguidance. Indeed, they took devils as their allies instead of God, thinking they were rightly guided. Here they are, returning captured in a single moment that encompasses both ends of their journey. Such is the Quranic style, unparalleled in its ability to convey profound truths. A call to the children of Adam. Once more, the Quran addresses humanity as the children of Adam, calling upon them in this pivotal moment before resuming the long journey along the prescribed path. O children of Adam, take your adornment at every place of worship and eat and drink, but do not be excessive. Surely he does not love the extravagant. Say, who has forbidden the adornments of God, which he has brought forth for his servants, and the good things of sustenance? Say, they are for those who believe in this life, and exclusively theirs on the day of resurrection. Thus do we explain the signs for people who know. Say, my sustainer has only forbidden indecencies, those that are apparent and those that are hidden, sin, unjust aggression, associating with God that for which he has sent no authority, and saying about God that which you do not know. This repeated emphasis on core truths of faith confronts the polytheists of Arabia over their practices during the age of Jahiliyyah. It also addresses all of humanity, reminding them of the grand narrative of human existence. The Quran links the prohibition of God's blessings, such as the good things of life, with the polytheistic mindset that dares to legislate without divine authority. It calls them to don the clothing God has provided, to adorn themselves with the garments he sent down, and to abandon their indecent practices. O children of Adam, take your adornment at every place of worship. It also invites them to enjoy the good things of life without excess. Eat and drink, but do not be excessive. Surely he does not love the extravagant. Even in their food, the Quraysh had introduced prohibitions, just as they had in their dress. This too was among their corrupt innovations. The Prophet's traditions confirm this, as reported in Sahih Muslim. The Arabs would perform tawaf naked, except for the Quraysh and their allies. If others wished to wear clothing, they had to borrow it from the Quraysh, and even then, they could only eat the food provided by the Quraysh when entering their lands. Among the many strange and degrading practices of the Arabs in the age of ignorance was their approach to clothing, or the lack thereof, during their rituals of pilgrimage. If a man among them had no friend in Mecca from whom he could borrow a garment, or if he lacked the wealth to purchase one, he was faced with one of two choices: either to circumambulate the Kaaba in complete nudity, or to perform the ritual in his own clothes, after which he would cast away the garment, never to touch it again. Such discarded clothing was called luka. In his tafsir, titled Ahkam al-Qur'an, Imam al-Qurtubi writes, "It is said that the Arabs during the pre-Islamic period refrained from consuming rich foods during their pilgrimage, subsisting only on meagre provisions. They would also circumambulate the Kaaba in a state of nudity. Thus God revealed the command, 'Take your adornment at every place of worship and eat and drink, but do not be excessive.' Excessiveness in this context encompasses both extremes, overindulgence and the forbidding of that which God has not prohibited. Both are forms of transgression, albeit from different perspectives." The Quranic narrative does not stop at merely encouraging the faithful to adorn themselves appropriately at every place of worship and to partake of wholesome food and drink. It goes further, expressing astonishment at the prohibition of such adornments and blessings that God has provided for his servants. Indeed, it is both illogical and irreverent for anyone to declare forbidden that which God has made lawful, or to render unlawful the adornments and bounties that he has bestowed upon humanity. The Quran rebukes such presumptuousness, say, "Who has forbidden the adornment of God, which he has brought forth for his servants, and the good things of his provision?" Following this rebuke, the Quran affirms that these adornments, be they garments or the wholesome provisions of sustenance, are a rightful gift to those who believe in God. By virtue of their faith, such blessings are theirs in this world, shared with others, yet reserved exclusively for them in the hereafter, where no disbeliever will have a share. Say, they are for those who believe in the life of this world, but exclusively theirs on the day of resurrection. Thus do we make the signs clear for people who know. It is those who truly understand the essence of this religion who derive benefit from such clarity. As for what God has genuinely forbidden, it is not the moderate adornments of clothing, nor the wholesome foods and drinks, so long as they are enjoyed without extravagance or arrogance. What God has truly forbidden, as the Qur'an emphatically declares, are the following. Say, "My sustainer has only forbidden obscene deeds, whether they be open or hidden, and sin and wrongful oppression, and that you associate with God that for which he has sent down no authority, and that you say about God what you do not know. These are the true prohibitions of God, acts of immorality that transgress the bounds set by him, whether committed openly or in secret. Sin, encompassing all forms of disobedience, wrongful oppression, which violates truth and justice as defined by God, and associating others with God in his divinity without any evidence or justification." This last prohibition includes the practice, common in the age of ignorance and every age of Jahiliyyah thereafter, of attributing to others the authority to legislate for humanity, a right that belongs exclusively to God. It further includes the grievous sin of speaking about God without knowledge, such as declaring things lawful or unlawful without divine sanction, and falsely attributing such rulings to him. One cannot help but marvel at the absurdities of the polytheists to whom these verses were originally addressed. When the Muslims first began to circumambulate the Kaaba clothed, the polytheists mocked them for it. Al-Kalbi narrates, "When the Muslims wore garments and performed their circuits around the Kaaba, the polytheists ridiculed them. Thus this verse was revealed." Consider how Jahiliyyah corrupts the hearts and minds of its adherents. Here were people who, in their delusion, believed it natural to worship God while stripped of clothing, their innate sense of modesty and human dignity utterly perverted. The Quran recounts the story of Adam and Eve in paradise, who, upon tasting the forbidden fruit, became aware of their nakedness and instinctively sought to cover themselves with the leaves of the garden. When they tasted of the tree, their nakedness became apparent to them, and they began to fasten together leaves of the garden to cover themselves. Yet these polytheists, in their spiritual degeneration, could not comprehend this basic human instinct. When they saw the Muslims circumambulating the Kaaba clothed in the very adornments God had decreed for humanity, garments bestowed to honor and dignify them, they mocked and derided them. Such is the nature of Jahiliyyah. It distorts not only values, but also the very instincts and perceptions of human beings. It corrupts their tastes, their standards and their judgments. And what, one might ask, does modern Jahiliyyah, this contemporary Jahiliyyah, do to people other than what the Jahiliyyah of the Arab polytheists, the Greeks, the Romans, the Persians, and every other age of Jahiliyyah has done before it? What does it do but strip people of their clothing, of their modesty, and of their sense of shame, while branding this degradation as progress, civilization, and modernity? And what does it do but mock the chaste, modest Muslim women who remain faithful to their sustainer, labelling them as backward, traditional, or provincial? It is the same disfigurement of human nature, the same inversion of values, the same perversion of standards. And after all this, there is pride and arrogance in such depravity. Have they handed down this legacy to one another? No, they are merely a people transgressing all bounds. And what is the connection between this stripping away, this descent into animalistic nakedness, this rebellion against modesty, and the polytheism that attributes to false deities the right to legislate for humanity? If the polytheists of pre-Islamic Arabia received their practices of nudity from earthly authorities who exploited their jahiliyyah and manipulated their minds in order to consolidate their rule over the Arabian Peninsula, then the polytheists of today, men and women alike, receive their commandments from similar earthly deities. They too are powerless to resist the dictates imposed upon them. The arbiters of fashion houses and their designers, the purveyors of cosmetics and their salons, these are the modern-day deities who command the blind obedience of the masses. These lords issue their decrees, and the herds of naked, submissive followers across the globe comply with servile devotion. Whether the new fashion suits a woman's body or not, whether the cosmetic rituals enhance her appearance or disfigure it, she obeys unquestioningly. To do otherwise would invite the derision of her fellow captives. And who, one must ask, is behind these fashion houses, these cosmetic empires, this relentless campaign of nakedness and exposure? Who fuels this insatiable frenzy of films, images, novels, magazines and newspapers that propagate this madness? Some of these media outlets have descended to such depths that they have become little more than mobile brothels, peddling indecency in the guise of art. Who orchestrates all of this? It is none other than the Jews. Lurking behind these institutions across the world, they exercise the powers of lordship over the helpless masses, achieving their objectives through this unrelenting onslaught. Their goals are manifold: to preoccupy the world with this madness, to spread moral and psychological decay, to corrupt human nature, and to render humanity a plaything in the hands of fashion designers and cosmetic moguls. They also seek to exploit this frenzy economically, driving the excessive consumption of fabrics, beauty products, and the countless industries that feed and perpetuate this madness. The issue of clothing and fashion cannot be separated from the divine legislation and guidance that God has prescribed for life. Hence the Qur'an's connection between this matter and the broader issue of faith and polytheism. It is connected to both creed and law through various bonds. It pertains, above all, to the concept of lordship, to the determination of the authority that legislates for people in matters that profoundly influence morality, economy, and all aspects of life. It also relates to highlighting the unique characteristics of man within the human race, emphasizing the human aspect of this race over its animalistic tendencies. Ignorance, jahiliyyah, distorts perceptions, tastes, values, and morals. It brands animalistic nakedness as progress and advancement, while labeling human modesty as backwardness and regression. What greater corruption could there be of human nature and its inherent qualities? And yet, even after this distortion, there are those in Jahiliyyah who argue, what has religion to do with attire? What has religion to do with women's clothing? What has religion to do with adornment? This is the distortion that afflicts people living in Jahiliyyah in every age and every place. And because this matter, which might appear peripheral, holds such immense importance in the scales of God and in the account of Islam being connected first to the issue of monotheism versus polytheism, and second to the purity of human nature, character, society, and life, or their corruption, the Quranic discourse follows this issue with a powerful and impactful reminder, the kind of reminder it reserves for the great matters of faith. It addresses the children of Adam, reminding them that their time on this earth is limited and predetermined, and that when their appointed term comes, they will neither delay nor advance it by a single moment. And for every community, there is an appointed term, and when their term comes, they can neither delay it by an hour nor advance it. This is one of the fundamental truths of this faith, hammered into the hearts of the heedless those who neither remember nor give thanks, so that they may awaken and not be deceived by the mere prolongation of life. That appointed term may refer to the death that ends the life of every generation, or to the lifespan allotted to every nation, the length of time decreed for its power and stewardship on this earth. But whether it is the end of an individual or the end of a nation, it is a fixed term, unalterable by either advancement or delay. Before we conclude this passage, we must note the remarkable similarity in the Quranic approach to confronting Jahiliyyah regarding sacrifices, vows, and the permissibility and prohibition of certain practices as seen in Surah Al-An'am, and its confrontation of Jahiliyyah here regarding clothing and food. In Surah Al-An'am, concerning sacrifices and vows related to livestock, crops, and fruits, the discourse begins with what Jahiliyyah actually practices and falsely attributes to God, claiming that their practices stem from divine injunctions. The Quran then challenges them to provide proof for their claims that God has prohibited what they claim to be forbidden or permitted what they claim to be lawful. Or were you witnesses when God enjoined this upon you? Who then is more wicked than he who fabricates lies against God to lead people astray without knowledge? Behold, God does not guide people who are unjust. The Quran then addresses their evasion of this challenge by attributing their polytheistic practices that usurp God's sole right to legislate to God's will. Those who associate partners with God will say, "Had God so willed, neither we nor our forefathers would have ascribed divinity to aught beside him, nor would we have declared anything forbidden. Thus did those who lived before them give the lie to the truth until they came to taste our punishment." Say, "Have you any certain knowledge which you can put before us? You follow nothing but conjecture. You do nothing but guess." Say, "God's is the final conclusive argument. Had he so willed, he would have guided you all aright." The Quran then exposes the falsity of their claims, demanding that they produce witnesses to testify in support of their fabrications. Say, "Bring forward your witnesses who would testify that God has forbidden this. And if they testify, do not bear witness with them, and do not follow the whims of those who have given the lie to our messages and those who do not believe in the hereafter, for they regard others as equal to their sustainer." Finally, after refuting their falsehoods and fabrications, the Quran declares the truth about what God has actually prohibited and commanded, drawing solely from the one and only reliable source in such matters. Say, "Come, let me convey unto you what your sustainer has really forbidden to you. Do not ascribe divinity in any way to aught beside him." Similarly, here in Surah Al-A'raf, the same structure is followed step by step. The Quran begins by describing what they are engaged in, the indecency of nakedness and their polytheistic practices of legislating prohibitions and permissions regarding clothing and food. It warns them about the immorality and idolatry they are committing, reminding them of the tragedy of nakedness that befell their first parents in paradise through the deception and scheming of Satan, and of God's blessing upon them in providing clothing and adornment. It then rejects their claim that their practices of prohibition and permission are divinely ordained, saying, "Say, who is there to forbid the beauty which God has brought forth for his creatures, and the good things from among the means of sustenance? Say, they are lawful in the life of this world to those who have attained to faith, and to them alone shall they belong on resurrection day." Thus do we make our messages clear unto people of innate knowledge. Here, the Quran refers to certain knowledge as opposed to the conjecture and guesswork upon which they base their religion, rituals, worship, and laws. Then, after demolishing their false claims, the Quran once again declares what God has truly prohibited. Say, my sustainer has forbidden only shameful deeds, be they open or secret, and all manner of sinning and unjust aggression, and that you should ascribe divinity to aught beside him, for which no evidence has ever been revealed, and that you should attribute to God something of which you have no knowledge. The Quran explains what God has commanded regarding clothing and food, not what they falsely attribute to him. O children of Adam, beautify yourselves for every act of worship, and eat and drink, but do not waste. Verily, he does not love the wasteful. In both of these confrontations, the matter is linked to the central issue of faith and polytheism, for at its core it is a question of sovereignty, who has the right to legislate in human life. And it is a question of servitude, to whom do people belong. The same issue, the same approach, and the same steps. And truly, God Almighty has spoken the truth. Had it been from any but God, they would surely have found in it much contradiction. This unity of method and approach becomes even more striking when we consider the distinct nature of Surah Al-An'am and Surah Al-A'raf, and the different contexts in which they address the issue of faith. For even though the contexts differ, the unity of method in confronting Jahiliyyah on fundamental issues remains unwavering. Glory be to the one who revealed this Qur'an. O children of Adam, whenever there come unto you messengers from among yourselves, conveying my messages unto you, then whoever becomes conscious of me and lives righteously, no fear need they have, and neither shall they grieve. But as for those who give the lie to our messages, and who scorn them in arrogance, they are destined for the fire therein to abide. And who could be more wicked than one who invents a lie about God or denies his messages? For such as these, their lot, as decreed in the book, shall reach them, until when our messengers come to take their souls, they will say, where now are those whom you invoked besides God? They will answer, they have forsaken us, and they will bear witness against themselves that they were indeed disbelievers. And God will say, enter then into the fire among the communities of jinn and humans who have passed away before you. Every time a new community enters the fire, it curses its sister community, until when they have all gathered therein, the last of them will say to the first, O our sustainer! It was they who led us astray, give them then a double chastisement in the fire. He will reply, for each of you there is double chastisement, though you do not realize it. And the first of them will say to the last, you were no better than us, so taste now the torment for all that you have earned. Verily, those who deny our messages and scorn them arrogantly, no gates of heaven shall be opened for them, and they shall not enter paradise until a camel passes through the eye of a needle. Thus do we reward the evildoers. Hell shall be their resting place, and above them shall be coverings of fire. Thus do we requite the wrongdoers. But those who believe and do righteous deeds, we do not burden any soul beyond its capacity. These shall be the dwellers of paradise. Therein shall they abide forever. And we shall remove from their hearts any rancour or bitterness. Rivers will flow beneath them, and they shall say, all praise is due to God, who has guided us to this. Never could we have found guidance had it not been for the guidance of God. Indeed, the messengers of our sustainer came with the truth, and they will be called out, this is the paradise which you have inherited as a reward for what you used to do. And the people of paradise will call out to the people of the fire, saying, we have indeed found the promise of our sustainer to be true. Have you, too, found the promise of your sustainer to be true? They will reply, yes. Then a herald shall proclaim between them, the curse of God is upon the wrongdoers, those who turn others away from the path of God, and seek to make it crooked, and who deny the hereafter. And between the two groups there shall be a barrier, and on the heights of that barrier there shall be men who recognize everyone by their marks, and they will call out to the people of paradise, peace be upon you. They will not have entered it, though they long to do so. When their eyes are turned towards the people of the fire, they will say, O our sustainer, do not place us among the wrongdoing people. And the people of the heights will call out to certain men, whom they recognize by their marks, saying, "What has all your amassing of wealth and your arrogance availed you? Are these the people of paradise, not those of whom you once swore that God would never grant them mercy? Now they are told, 'Enter paradise. No fear shall be upon you, nor shall you grieve.' And the people of the fire will call out to the people of paradise, saying, 'Pour upon us some water or something of what God has provided you with.' They will reply, 'Truly God has forbidden both to those who denied the truth, those who took their religion to be mere play and amusement, and whom the life of this world beguiled. On that day we shall forget them as they forgot the coming of this, their day of judgment, and as they were wont to deny our revelations. And indeed we have brought them a book which we have clearly expounded, based on knowledge, a guidance and a mercy for those who believe. Are they then waiting for the fulfillment of its warnings? On the day when its fulfillment comes, those who had forgotten it before will say, 'Indeed, the messengers of our sustainer brought the truth.' Have we then any intercessors who might intercede for us? Or could we be sent back to the world so that we might act differently from what we used to do? They have indeed ruined their own selves, and all that they used to invent has forsaken them. Now, after this long pause for reflection on the story of humanity's first beginnings and the confrontation with the reality of Arab paganism, and indeed with the reality of all human jahiliyyah throughout time regarding the covering of the body with garments and the soul with piety, and the connection of this entire issue to the overarching question of faith, a new call is issued to the children of Adam, a call regarding the central matter that was tied to the previous discourse on clothing, the matter of receiving guidance and following it in devotional practices, in religious laws, and in all aspects of life. This call defines the source from which they must receive their guidance. It is from the messengers of God who convey his revelations. And upon their acceptance or rejection of the messengers depends their ultimate reckoning and recompense at the end of this journey, which the divine discourse unfolds before them. O children of Adam, whenever there come unto you messengers from among yourselves, conveying my messages unto you, then whoever becomes conscious of me and lives righteously, no fear need they have, and neither shall they grieve. But as for those who give the lie to our messages and who scorn them in arrogance, they are destined for the fire, therein to abide. This is God's covenant with Adam and his descendants. This is his condition for their stewardship of the earth, a stewardship granted by his will, on the earth which he created and apportioned for their sustenance. He has appointed humanity as his vicegerents, empowering them to fulfill this role in accordance with his covenant and command. Otherwise, their deeds are rendered null and void in this world, unacceptable to God, and their burden in the hereafter will be none other than the fire of hell, a recompense from which no ransom or intercession will avail. And so whoever is conscious of God and sets aright their ways, no fear need they have, nor shall they grieve. For God consciousness keeps them far from sin and indecency, the most grievous of all sins being the ascription of partners to God, the usurpation of his sovereignty, and the claim to attributes that belong to his divinity alone. It leads them instead to purity in action and obedience to him, and ultimately brings them to safety from fear and contentment with their eternal destiny. But as for those who deny our signs and scorn them in arrogance, they are the companions of the fire, therein to abide. For their denial and their haughty refusal to surrender to the covenant and command of God, they join their ally Iblis in the fire, where God's promise shall be fulfilled. As for those who follow you, I shall fill hell with you all. And now the discourse transitions to a depiction of the moment of death when the appointed end comes, as referenced at the close of the previous discourse. For every community there is an appointed term, and when their term comes, they can neither delay it by a single moment, nor can they hasten it. Then follows the scene of resurrection and reckoning, and finally the scene of judgment and recompense. It is as though these events are brought forth in vivid detail to elaborate upon the distinction between the God-conscious and the arrogant, portraying their respective states after the appointed end. In the Quranic style, these scenes come alive with unparalleled vividness, as though the reader or listener is transported to witness them firsthand, fully immersed in their reality. The Quranic methodology places great emphasis on the scenes of the last day resurrection, accountability, bliss, and torment. These are not presented as mere descriptions, but as dynamic living realities. The world that God has promised after this present life becomes palpably vivid, tangible, and animated. Believers of that time lived in that world as though it were part of their immediate reality. They witnessed its scenes in their hearts, felt their emotions stirred by it, and experienced its terror at times and its tranquility at others. They could feel the scorching heat of the fire from afar and sense the gentle breezes of paradise drawing near. Thus, they became intimately acquainted with that world long before the day of judgment. For those who reflect on their words and sentiments about the hereafter, it becomes evident that they lived within it more deeply and sincerely than they did in this transient world. They would shift their entire being to that realm, as if moving from one house to another, or from one land to another within this visible, tangible life. The hereafter was not, for them, a distant promise, but a present and experienced reality. Perhaps the scenes depicted here are among the longest portrayals of the last day in the Qur'an, filled with movement, successive imagery, and diverse dialogues. The abundant vitality of these scenes astonishes the mind. How can mere words evoke such a vivid sensory experience, as though one were witnessing them with one's own eyes? These scenes come within the surah as a continuation of the narrative of Adam's creation, his departure from paradise alongside his wife through the deception of Satan, and God's warning to the children of Adam not to let Satan deceive them as he deceived their forebears. They are told to beware of following their ancient enemy, Satan, in the whispers he casts to them, and are sternly warned that if they choose him over the guidance conveyed by God's messengers, they will be handed over to him. Thus the narrative shifts seamlessly to the moment of death and the subsequent scenes of the last day, as though no time at all separates them. The events unfold as the fulfillment of what the messengers had forewarned. Those who obeyed Satan are barred from returning to paradise, deceived away from it just as their forebears were expelled. And those who opposed Satan and obeyed God are welcomed back to paradise, and a call resounds from the heavenly hosts. This is the paradise you have inherited by virtue of your deeds. It is as though they are returning home like exiles, making their way back to their abode of bliss. The harmony between the earlier narrative of Adam and these subsequent scenes of the last day is a marvel of beauty. The story begins in the heavenly assembly, in the presence of the angels on the day God created Adam and his wife and placed them in paradise, only for Satan to lead them away from their station of pure obedience, causing their expulsion. And it concludes too in the heavenly assembly, again in the presence of the angels. The beginning and the end are thus connected, with the span of worldly life and the moment of death in between. And the entire sequence is perfectly consistent, with each part aligned seamlessly with the others. Now let us delve into these astonishing scenes. Here we are, standing before the moment of death, the death of those who fabricated lies against God, claiming that the beliefs and rituals they inherited from their ancestors, or the customs and laws they devised for themselves, were sanctioned by God. These are the same ones who denied the signs of God brought to them by his messengers, the certain guidance revealed in God's law, preferring conjecture and guesswork over certainty and truth. They enjoyed their share of worldly pleasures as decreed for them by God, and their allotted time for testing, as well as their share of the signs of God conveyed by his messengers. Who then is more wicked than one who fabricates a lie against God or denies his signs? Such as these shall receive their share as ordained in the book, until, when our messengers come to take their souls, they will say, "Where now are those whom you invoked besides God?" They will reply, "They have forsaken us," and they will bear witness against themselves that they were disbelievers. Here we stand, witnessing those who lied against God or denied his signs, as the angels of death come to them to seize their souls. A dialogue ensues between them and the angels. Where now are those whom you invoked besides God? Where are your claims, the falsehoods you attributed to God? Where are the deities you worshipped and revered, abandoning what God had revealed to you through his messengers? Where are they now in this decisive moment when your life is being taken and you find no escape from death, no delay from the appointed hour decreed by God? The answer is the only one possible, the undeniable truth. They have forsaken us. They have vanished from us, disappeared into oblivion. We cannot find them, nor can they find their way to us. How wretched are servants whose gods cannot reach them in their moment of greatest need, and how pitiful are gods that fail to aid their worshippers in this critical hour. And they will bear witness against themselves that they were disbelievers. Thus we have seen them before in the Surah when God's punishment came upon them in this world. When our punishment came upon them, their only cry was, "We were indeed wrongdoers." And once the scene of death concludes, we find ourselves transported to the next scene. These very same souls are now in the fire. The narrative skips over the interval between death and resurrection, leaping directly from the moment of passing to the torment of the fire. Enter then among the communities of jinn and humans who have passed away before you into the fire. Every time a new community enters, it curses its sister community until, when they have all gathered therein, the last of them will say to the first, "Our sustainer! These led us astray, give them then a double punishment in the fire." He will reply, "For each of you there is double punishment, though you do not realize it." And the first of them will say to the last, "You were no better than us, so taste now the torment for all that you used to do." Enter then among the communities of jinn and humans who have passed away before you into the fire. Join your companions and allies from among the jinn and humans here in the fire. Was not Iblis himself the one who defied his sustainer? And it is he who drove Adam and his spouse out of the garden. It is he who led astray those he could from among his progeny. It is he whom God has promised shall be cast, along with those he has deceived, into the fire. Enter then. All of you foremost and last alike, enter together, for you are all one another's allies, and all of you share the same fate. And so were these nations, these communities, and these factions in the life of this world, bound together by allegiance, where the latter would follow the former, and the leaders would pave the way for their followers. But now let them see how rancor festers between them today, and how mockery and blame consume them. Whenever a nation enters the fire, it curses its sister nation. What a wretched end it is where the son curses his father and the ally disowns his companion. Until, when they are all gathered therein, those who came first and those who came last, the farthest and the nearest, they begin to quarrel and dispute. The latter group will cry out to the former, "Our sustainer, it was they who led us astray, so double for them the torment of the fire." And so begins their tragedy or their farce. The scene unveils itself, showing erstwhile comrades and allies now as strangers and enemies, accusing one another, cursing one another, and calling upon their sustainer to mete out the harshest punishment upon one another. They now turn to our sustainer, whom they once denied and whose signs they rejected, invoking him alone and beseeching him with their pleas. And the response comes, an answer to their supplication, but what an answer it is. To each shall be a double share of the torment, though you do not comprehend. Thus all of them, those who invoked and those upon whom the invocation was made, receive the multiplied torment they themselves had sought. And it seems almost as though the cursed ones take a bitter pleasure in the plight of their cursors when they hear this response to their plea, for they turn to them with derision. "We are all alike in this punishment." Then the first group will say to the latter, "You had no advantage over us. Taste then the torment for what you used to earn." And so ends this painful, mocking scene, only for the declaration of their fate to follow a fate that shall not change. And this is declared before the contrasting scene of the believers in the abode of bliss is presented. Indeed, those who denied our signs and turned away from them in arrogance, the gates of heaven shall not be opened for them, nor shall they enter paradise until a camel passes through the eye of a needle. Thus do we requite the evildoers. For them there shall be a bed of hellfire, and coverings of fire above them. Thus do we requite the wrongdoers. So pause and let your imagination linger on this wondrous scene. The camel before the eye of the needle. Only when that needle's tiny opening admits the great lumbering camel, only then shall the gates of heaven open for these obstinate deniers. Only then shall their supplications or repentance be accepted, though the time will have long passed, and only then shall they enter the gardens of eternal bliss. Until that day, they shall remain here in the fire, where they have all gathered together, where they have followed one another, blaming and cursing one another, invoking the worst punishment for one another, and receiving precisely what they had sought for their companions. Thus do we requite the evildoers. Now let us contemplate their condition within the fire. For them there shall be a bed of hellfire, and coverings of fire above them. From beneath them there is a fiery bed mockingly called a resting place, though it offers neither rest nor softness nor comfort. And above them there are fiery coverings that enshroud them. Thus do we requite the wrongdoers. And who are the wrongdoers? They are the evildoers. They are the polytheists who ascribe partners to God. They are those who deny his signs. They are those who invent lies about God. All of these descriptions in the language of the Qur'an are synonymous. Now turn to the contrasting scene, the scene of those who believed and did righteous deeds. But those who believe and do righteous deeds, we do not burden any soul beyond its capacity. They are the companions of paradise. Therein they shall abide, and we shall remove whatever rancor may linger in their hearts. Rivers shall flow beneath them, and they shall say, "All praise is due to God who has guided us to this. We would never have been guided had God not guided us. Indeed, the messengers of our sustainer came with the truth." And a voice shall call out to them, "This is the paradise you have been made to inherit as a reward for what you used to do." These are the ones who believed and did righteous deeds to the best of their ability. For no soul is burdened beyond its strength. These are they who now return to their garden. They are its rightful inhabitants by God's permission and grace. He has granted it to them as an inheritance through his mercy, in recompense for their deeds of righteousness combined with their faith. It is a reward for their obedience to God's commands and their defiance of Satan's whisperings. It is a reward for their submission to the commands of the Most Great, Most Merciful, and for their resistance to the enticements of the cunning ancient enemy. And were it not for God's mercy, even their deeds, limited as they are by human frailty, would not suffice to earn them this reward. As the messenger of God, peace and blessings be upon him, said, "None of you will enter paradise by his deeds alone." They asked, "Not even you, O messenger of God?" He replied, "Not even I, unless God enfolds me in his grace and mercy." There is no contradiction here between the words of God and the words of his messenger, for the messenger does not speak from his own desire. All the disputes that have arisen among the Islamic sects on this matter stem not from a correct understanding of religion, but from the dictates of human whims. For God has known the weakness, incapacity, and limitations of the children of Adam, knowing that their deeds can never fully measure up to the worthiness of paradise or even to the worth of a single one of God's blessings in this world. Therefore he has decreed mercy upon himself, accepting from them their humble, imperfect striving, and granting them paradise as a reward through his grace and mercy. Thus they earn it through their deeds, but only by his mercy. And so, while those deniers, fabricators, criminals, wrongdoers, and idolaters curse one another in the fire, their hearts boiling with hatred and rancour, though they were once allies and confidants, the believers who did righteous deeds abide in paradise as brothers, loving, pure-hearted, and at peace, enveloped by mutual goodwill and harmony. And we shall remove whatever rancour may linger in their hearts, for they are human, and they lived as humans. In the life of this world, it is natural that anger may have flared among them, and rancour may have stirred in their hearts, anger which they suppressed, and rancour which they struggled to overcome. Yet some trace of it may have remained within them. As Al-Qurtubi mentions in his Tafsir, Akam al-Quran, the messenger of God, peace and blessings be upon him, said, "The rancor shall cling to the gates of paradise like a tethered camel until God removes it from the hearts of the believers." And it is narrated that Ali, may God be pleased with him, said, "I hope that I, along with Uthman, Talha and Zubayr, will be among those of whom God has said, and we shall remove whatever rancor may linger in their hearts." And while the people of the fire are consumed by flames from beneath them and above them, the people of paradise dwell amidst rivers flowing beneath their feet, with gentle breezes caressing the atmosphere and filling it with serenity. Rivers flow beneath their feet, and while those in the fire are occupied with quarrelling and mutual recrimination, these in paradise busy themselves with gratitude and acknowledgement. And they will say, "Praise be to God who has guided us to this. For we would never have found guidance had God not guided us. Truly, the messengers of our sustainer came with the truth." And while the former, the people of the fire, are called with words of humiliation and rebuke, "Enter into the company of nations who passed away before you, of jinn and humankind, into the fire." The latter, the people of paradise, are addressed with words of welcome and honour. And they were called out, "This is the garden you have been made to inherit as a reward for what you used to do." Thus the contrast between the companions of the garden and the companions of the fire is complete. And then the narrative proceeds, revealing to us yet another scene following the one before. The people of paradise have now found peace in their eternal abode, while the people of the fire have become certain of their wretched fate. And now the former turn to the latter, calling out to them and asking about what they have found of God's ancient promise. And the companions of paradise will call out to the companions of the fire, "We have indeed found what our sustainer promised us to be true. Have you too found what your sustainer promised to be true?" They will say, "Yes." And then a voice will declare between them, "God's curse is upon the wrongdoers, those who turn others away from the path of God, seeking to make it crooked, and who deny the hereafter." In this question lies a bitter irony, for the believers are as certain of the fulfillment of God's warnings as they are of the fulfillment of his promises. And yet they ask, and the answer comes in a single word: yes. At that moment the answer ends, and the dialogue is cut short, as the voice resounds, and a voice will declare between them, "God's curse is upon the wrongdoers, those who turn others away from the path of God, seeking to make it crooked, and who deny the hereafter." Thus the meaning of the wrongdoers is clarified. It is synonymous with the deniers. They are those who seek to divert others from the path of God, desiring to make his way crooked rather than straight. They desire deviation, not uprightness, for uprightness has but one form, the steadfast adherence to the path of God, his guidance and his law. Everything besides it is crookedness, an intentional turning away from the straight path. And this willful distortion is inseparably linked with disbelief in the hereafter. For no one truly believes in the hereafter, nor is certain of their return to their sustainer, while simultaneously turning others away from God's path and deviating from his guidance and law. This is the true depiction of the inner reality of those who follow any law other than God's law, a depiction that unveils the essence of their souls and renders their inner state with precise clarity. And now, attention turns to the external scene. There is a barrier separating paradise from the fire, and upon it stand men who recognize the companions of both paradise and the fire by their marks. Who are these men? And what is their role with the companions of paradise and the companions of the fire? And between them shall be a barrier, and on the heights there will be men who recognize all by their marks, and they will call out to the companions of paradise, "Peace be upon you." They will not have entered it, although they long to do so. And when their eyes are turned toward the companions of the fire, they will cry out, "Our sustainer, do not place us among the wrongdoing people." And the men on the heights will call out to certain men whom they recognize by their marks, saying, "Of what avail to you was your hoarded wealth and the false pride you used to show? Are these the ones about whom you swore that God would never show them mercy? Enter paradise. No fear shall be upon you, nor shall you grieve." It has been narrated that these men who stand upon the heights, the barrier separating paradise and the fire, are a group of people whose good and bad deeds are equal. Their good deeds did not suffice to admit them to paradise alongside the people of paradise, nor did their bad deeds condemn them to the fire alongside the people of the fire. They remain in this in-between state, awaiting God's grace and hoping for his mercy. They recognize the people of paradise by their marks, perhaps by the radiance and brightness of their faces, or by the light that shines before them and on their right. And they recognize the people of the fire by their marks, perhaps by the darkness and gloom of their faces, or by the brand upon their noses, as mentioned in the chapter Al-Kalam. We shall brand him upon the snout. And here they are, turning to the people of paradise with words of peace. Peace be upon you. They utter these words while longing to join them in paradise, and when their gaze falls upon the people of the fire, almost as though turned toward them unwillingly, they seek refuge in God from sharing their fate. And when their eyes are turned toward the companions of the fire, they will cry out, "Our sustainer, do not place us among the wrongdoing people." Then they see before them men great criminals, known to them by their marks, and they address them with reproach and condemnation. And the men on the heights will call out to certain men whom they recognize by their marks, saying, "Of what avail to you was your hoarded wealth, and the false pride you used to show? Are these the ones about whom you swore that God would never show them mercy? Enter paradise, no fear shall be upon you, nor shall you grieve." And finally we hear a voice rising from the depths of the fire, filled with desperation and pleading. And the companions of the fire will call out to the companions of paradise, "Pour upon us some water, or some of that which God has provided for you." And now we turn to the other side, hearing the response, laden with painful and bitter admonition. They will say, "God has forbidden both to the deniers, those who took their religion as play and amusement, and whom the life of this world deluded." And then the voices of humankind fade away, leaving only the voice of the Almighty, the one who possesses all majesty and judgment. Today we shall forget them as they forgot the meeting of this day of theirs, and as they used to reject our signs. And indeed we brought them a book which we detailed with knowledge, a guidance, and mercy for people who believe. Do they await anything but its fulfillment? On the day its fulfillment comes, those who had forgotten it before will say, "The messengers of our sustainer indeed brought the truth." So, are there any intercessors to intercede for us? Or could we be sent back so that we might do other than what we used to do? They have ruined their own souls, and lost from them is all that they used to fabricate. Thus, the scenes of this narrative unfold, back and forth glimpses of the hereafter, juxtaposed with glimpses of the world. A glimpse of the tormented in the fire, forgotten as they once forgot the meeting of this day, as they denied God's signs, even though he had sent them a book, detailed and clear, revealed with divine knowledge. But they turned away from it, following their whims and delusions, and a glimpse of them in this world, awaiting the fulfillment of that book, dreading the fate it warns against. And now they see that fate unfolding before them in the scenes of this narrative. It is a wondrous rhythm of glimpses brought to life by this miraculous book. And so the grand tableau comes to an end, accompanied by a concluding reminder, a reminder of this day and its scenes, a warning against denying God's signs and messengers, and a caution against awaiting the fulfillment of this book. For this is its fulfillment, a day when repentance is no longer accepted, intercession is of no avail, and there is no return to life for a second chance to act. Yes, this is how the wondrous spectacle comes to an end, and we awaken from it as one awakens from a captivating scene we had been witnessing. We return from it to this world in which we find ourselves. Having traversed a long, long journey of coming and going, a journey of all life itself, and the journey of resurrection, reckoning and reward thereafter. Before that, we were with humanity in its earliest inception, in its descent to the earth, and in its movement upon it. And thus does the Qur'an take the hearts of humankind across these vast spans of existence, the cosmos and the ages. It shows them what was, what is, and what will be, all in fleeting glimpses, so that they might remember and heed the warning. This is a book that has been sent down to you, so let there be no distress in your heart because of it, so that you may warn thereby and be a reminder for the believers. Follow what has been sent down to you from your sustainer, and do not follow other masters besides him. How little do you remember? Indeed, your sustainer is God, who created the heavens and the earth in 6 days, then established himself on the throne. He covers the night with the day, which pursues it swiftly, and he created the sun, the moon, and the stars, all subjugated to his command. Behold, his is the creation and the command. Blessed is God, the sustainer of all the worlds. 754. Call upon your sustainer with humility and in secrecy. Indeed, he does not love the transgressors. And do not cause corruption upon the earth after it has been set aright. Call upon him with fear and hope. Indeed, the mercy of God is near to those who do good. It is he who sends the winds as glad tidings heralding his mercy. When they bear heavy clouds, we drive them to a dead land. And then we send down water from it, bringing forth thereby every kind of fruit. Thus do we bring forth the dead, so that you may remember. As for the good land, its vegetation emerges by the permission of its sustainer, but that which is bad produces only scant, begrudging growth. Thus do we diversify the signs for a people who are grateful. 755-58. After that vast journey through time from the beginning to the end, the Quranic discourse takes humanity by the hand on another journey, through the soul of the universe and across its open pages laid bare before their sight. It presents the story of the creation of the heavens and the earth after narrating the creation of humanity. It directs the eyes and hearts to the mysteries and secrets embedded within this cosmos, to its phenomena and its conditions, to the night that follows the day in that celestial dance, to the sun, the moon, and the stars, all subservient to the command of God, to the winds that traverse the atmosphere, carrying clouds to lifeless lands by the permission of God where life is brought forth, and the dead earth yields fruits of every kind. These wanderings through the dominion of God follow the story of human origins, the depiction of the journey's two ends, the warning against following Satan, and the arrogance of turning away from God's messengers. They come after the display of ignorant notions and traditions that people fabricate for themselves without God's sanction or authority. The discourse takes these wanderings to lead humanity back to their sustainer, the one who created this existence and subjugated it, the one who governs it by his laws and directs it by his decree, the one to whom alone belong creation and command. It is the powerful, profound rhythm of the universe's servitude to its creator. Within this grand harmony, humanity's arrogance in refusing this servitude appears as discord, a jarring dissonance in the symphony of existence, making the one who turns away appear as an alien, disfigured anomaly in the fabric of creation. And in the shadow of these scenes, in the face of this majestic rhythm, they are called, "Call upon your sustainer with humility and in secrecy. Indeed, he does not love the transgressors, and do not cause corruption upon the earth after it has been set aright. Call upon him with fear and hope. Indeed, the mercy of God is near to those who do good." The sincerity of religion to God and the affirmation of humanity's servitude to him alone is but a branch of the universal submission of all existence to his will. This is the message that the Quranic method seeks to establish and deepen in the human heart. For any heart or mind that turns, with awareness and attentiveness, toward this cosmos, toward its hidden laws and its manifest phenomena that proclaim those hidden laws, cannot help but feel an undeniable awe of the one who governs it all. Such a heart cannot help but tremble from its depths with an overwhelming awareness of the Creator, the Sustainer, the one who commands and decrees. This is the first step in moving such a heart to respond to God's call and to surrender to his will, the will to which all of existence surrenders effortlessly. And so, the Quranic method takes this universe as its first domain in which to reveal the truth of God's lordship over all creation and to awaken humanity to their servitude to him alone. It seeks to infuse their hearts and entire being with the reality of this servitude, allowing them to taste its sweetness, the sweetness of trusting surrender, of serene confidence, of feeling oneself in perfect harmony with all that surrounds one. It is not mere intellectual proof that the Quranic method aims to present when it portrays the universe's submission to God, its subjugation to His command, and its willing surrender to His governance with precision, grace, and depth. Rather, it aims to evoke another taste beyond the intellectual proof and alongside it, the taste of communion with the cosmos, the taste of harmony with the totality of existence, the taste of serenity and ease as one joins the universal march of faith. It is the taste of a willing, joyous servitude, one not driven by coercion or compulsion, but moved prior to command or obligation by a deep yearning, a tranquil trust, and a profound harmony with all of creation. This servitude does not entertain thoughts of fleeing from God's commands or escaping His decrees, for it is but the fulfillment of a natural, innate need, the need for beautiful, comforting surrender. It is the surrender to God that raises the heads of humanity from bowing to any other master, freeing them from servitude to anything or anyone besides Him. It is the noble, dignified surrender to the sustainer of all the worlds. This surrender is the essence of faith, the very taste and fragrance of it. This servitude is what gives Islam its true meaning and life. It is the foundation that must be established and made firm before the introduction of obligations and commands, before the enactment of rituals and laws. Thus, the Quranic method devotes its utmost care to establishing, affirming, deepening, and anchoring this foundation in the hearts of humanity. Indeed, your sustainer is God, who created the heavens and the earth in 6 days, then established Himself upon the throne. He causes the night to cover the day, which pursues it swiftly, and He created the sun, the moon, and the stars, all subjugated by His command. Verily, to Him belongs creation and command. Blessed is God, the sustainer of all worlds. The Islamic doctrine of Tawhid, God's oneness, leaves no room for any human conception of God's essence or the manner of His actions. For God, exalted is He, is unlike anything in existence. Thus, the human mind, limited as it is to the realm of the tangible, cannot construct any image of God's being. All human concepts are derived from the finite world in which the human mind operates, and since God is utterly beyond comparison, the human intellect must altogether cease from imagining any form or likeness of His essence. Consequently, it must also refrain from attempting to comprehend the nature of His actions. What remains for humanity is to reflect upon the effects of His actions as manifested in the universe around them, for this is the only avenue open to them. Thus, questions such as, how did God create the heavens and the earth? How did He establish Himself upon the throne? What is the nature of this throne upon which He established Himself? Such questions are futile, for they stand in opposition to the fundamental principle of Islamic belief. To answer them would be even greater folly, something no one who understands this principle would ever attempt. Yet, in the history of Islamic thought, various groups unfortunately immersed themselves deeply in such debates. This was due to the influence of Hellenistic philosophy, which infiltrated Islamic thought. As for the 6 days in which God created the heavens and the earth, they too belong to the unseen, something no human or any of God's creatures has ever witnessed. I did not make them witnesses to the creation of the heavens and the earth, nor to their own creation. Qur'an, 1851. Anything said about these 6 days lacks any definitive foundation. They could refer to 6 stages or 6 phases or 6 of God's days, which cannot be measured by the standards of time we know, since time itself, derived from the movement of celestial bodies, did not exist prior to creation. Or they could mean something else entirely. No one can assert with certainty what this number precisely signifies. Any attempt to interpret this text or similar ones based on human conjectures, which do not rise above the level of hypotheses or speculations in the name of science, is nothing but an arbitrary effort. Such endeavours stem from a spiritual defeat in the face of science, which in this domain can offer nothing beyond conjecture and assumption. From such futile inquiries that add nothing to the purpose or direction of the Quranic text, We turn instead to embark upon the beautiful, evocative journey through the realms of the visible universe and its hidden mysteries, as depicted in the Qur'an. Indeed, your sustainer is God, who created the heavens and the earth in 6 days, then established himself upon the throne. He causes the night to cover the day, which pursues it swiftly, and he created the sun, the moon, and the stars, all subjugated by his command. Verily, to him belongs creation and command. Blessed is God, the sustainer of all worlds, the God who created this majestic universe in all its vastness and splendor, who is exalted above it all and governs it by his command and directs it by his decree, who causes the night to envelop the day in a relentless cycle, this unceasing alternation between night and day in the rotating expanse of the cosmos, he who made the sun, the moon, and the stars subservient to his will. He, the creator, the sustainer, the sovereign, is your sustainer. He alone is worthy of being your sustainer, nurturing you through his guidance, uniting you by his system, legislating for you by his command, and judging between you by his wisdom. He alone is the possessor of creation and command. Just as there is no creator besides him, there is no lawgiver alongside him. This is the central truth that this majestic portrayal seeks to affirm. The truth of divinity, lordship, and sovereignty, all of which belong exclusively to God. This truth affirms the servitude of humankind to their Creator in all aspects of their lives and laws. It is this fundamental issue that the Quranic discourse addresses, as seen in matters of clothing and food in this particular passage, just as the sixth surah, Al-An'am, addressed it in matters of livestock, crops, rituals, and vows. In the midst of this profound focus on the overarching purpose of the Quranic discourse, we must not overlook the breathtaking beauty of the imagery, its vividness, its dynamism, and its wondrous suggestions. From this perspective, the imagery is perfectly suited to the grandeur of the purpose it seeks to achieve. The description of the alternation of night and day in the vast expanse of the revolving cosmos. The night pursuing the day with earnest determination is a cycle so vivid that the human soul cannot help but follow it, turning with it as it rotates. It is a cycle that captivates the heart, leaving it trembling, the soul breathless, as it witnesses this majestic interplay between night and day. The entire scene is imbued with motion and vitality, brimming with anticipation and yearning. The depiction of night and day as conscious, willful entities, each striving and seeking, elevates the imagery to a level of artistic beauty unattainable by human imagination. The familiarity that often dulls our perception of the universe, rendering its scenes mundane to our senses, is stripped away in this Quranic expression. In its place emerges the awe-inspiring magnificence of a fresh, wondrous vision that strikes the soul as if for the very first time. In this depiction, night and day are not mere natural phenomena, monotonously recurring. Rather, they are living entities, endowed with awareness, spirit, will, and purpose. They interact with humanity, sharing in the rhythms of life, its struggles, its competitions, and its races. Similarly, the sun, the moon, and the stars are portrayed as living beings with soul and spirit. They receive God's command and obey it, submitting to his will and proceeding along their ordained paths, like sentient beings fulfilling their duty to God. It is this perspective that stirs the human conscience and draws it toward submission, aligning it with the universal procession of beings who willingly surrender to their Creator. Thus, the Quran exerts its unparalleled influence, unmatched by any human speech. It addresses the innate nature of humanity with a power derived from its divine source, the one who knows the secrets of hearts and the mysteries of human nature.